Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Naruto went to the world of One Piece. Naruto's age has passed him by as his time is over. Now he attempts to seek out a place for himself in the new world, and it's bigger than he ever figured it to be. Will be epic in length. Before we start, thank you for all of the support, it really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like. You can suggest a Naruto fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it. And check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Chapter 36. At your heels. Almost a full day after the arrival of the Foxhound pirates, the doors to a casino set in the Titanic meteor of Constellation Island flew open with Polly getting hurled out by bouncers, and IOU. What the kind of place do you think this is? Come back when you actually have money to gamble with, the burly men said before walking back into the establishment. Polly picked himself up off of the ground and dusted his clothes off as he grabbed the cigar that had fallen from his mouth off of the ground. Okay. Fine. I didn't want to stay in your Thai casino anyway. The dice are loaded. There's no way I could lose that much for real. Soren and Johnny walked out of the doors behind him with grins on their faces and multiple six-packs of bottles in their possession. I told you, don't gamble unless Naruto Aniki is around. You'd never lose that way, Johnny said as he handed a bottle to Polly only to grab it right back once he saw the shipwright prepared to chuck it at the casino he had just been thrown from. No. Soren shook his head in complete amusement at what he had just borne witness to for the last several hours. You dude, that was just a joy to watch. Before possibly further raising a stink about his monetary situation, Polly decided to be proactive over the whole situation. Hey, can I borrow some money from you guys? Instead of answering verbally, Johnny and Soren looked at each other and simply began walking away. Oh come on. We're crewmates, aren't we? Doesn't that mean something? My pay goes here, Soren said, holding up a bottle before downing it swiftly and wiping his mouth. It'll come back out later if you still want it though. He finished before getting caught in Polly's ropes wrapping tightly around his body. Ha. Oh come on, that was a good joke. No need to be so sore about it. The less inebriated of the pair that included himself and the acid-spitting first mate, Johnny made sure to take the other 6 packs from the tied-up Soren to make sure that he didn't drop them or melt them by accident when he decided to break out of Polly's strong ropes. If you really want money you should go find Nojiko Ainu. She's the one that hands it out no matter what Naruto Aniki says about him being the boss. Soren rolled his eyes, still allowing himself to be tied up by Polly's ropes instead of just generating acid and getting through them. If you ask for money from Nojiko you'd better do it behind some cover. Actually never mind, because she can fire behind cover. She wouldn't shoot anybody just for asking for money. Now you're getting ridiculous, Johnny said before looking around the part of town they were in. Hey, where did everyone go? The streets were kind of buzzing when we went in there and now this place is dead. As far as they had seen, this town never really stopped operating because of the lack of daylight, making it so that light was not really a factor in the activity of the island. Polly took a puff of his cigar and joined Johnny in looking around the deserted streets. Maybe this place's lazy clock just had everybody sync up at the same time and they're all taking one big power nap. Fire. Or, Soren said, trailing off once he heard the firm call for something to fire. This could be happening. Boom! The sound of a cannon blast got all 3 of the Foxhound pirates to scatter before a cannonball smashed into the ground right where they had been standing. They looked in the trajectory of the blast to see a cannon set up on a hill in the meteor that had a good vantage point on them. Johnny boy, if you would, Soren requested plainly from a perch on an awning of a building as he saw of Marines charging down the streets at them with sabers drawn. Johnny nodded and fed his guard from his sheath with his thumb before taking off directly at them faster than they could see, cutting down the lesser sword users with nothing visible other than flashes of silver and the blood flying off of the wounded Marines. Subaru J. Sliding J. With the dozens of Marines dealt with, he proceeded to charge through the streets towards the hill where the cannon was set. The cannon operating team on the hill could see Johnny moving towards them at a blisteringly inhuman pace, with any Marine group trying to halt his rush getting cut down without his sword looking like it was never even drawn to strike them down with. A second cannon blast missed him miserably and before the desperate team could load another swow he was upon them, easily defeating them. After taking out the cannon, Johnny took a seat on top of it and waved down at Polly and Soren before hopping off and racing back to them. In a few seconds he stood in front of them with his hand on his sheathed sword. Time. 26 seconds, and I think you got over 100 guys at the 15 mark. 117 in all. Polly said as he placed a stopwatch back into his pocket. Quote exclamation mark. I'm slow. Johnny yelled loudly, kicking a nearby wall. Zoro and Ikki would have finished that in 15. What did you do to my men? At the end of the street all three of the pirates could see Tashigi standing there among her gravely injured underlings with an angry look on her face while she clutched her sword tightly. Johnny and Polly took one gigantic step away from Soren as he continued to stare at her. Both of them pointed at Soren to shift blame while Soren was unable to point the finger at anyone due to the fact that he was still tied up. Hi. He eventually said, trying to smooth things over with a sheepish grin. I bet you're wondering why so many Marines are laying here and bleeding out all over, and that's actually a funny story. Well, not so much. Ha ha. Funny is, painful, funny, because I can tell you that they're definitely in pain. You again. Tashigi said fitfully, drawing her sword and pointing it at Soren. As she did this, hundreds more reinforcements came up to back her up, but she held up a hand stopping them from advancing. Don't get any closer to him, he's too dangerous for you all to fight. Baby, I'm too dangerous for you to fight. Soren said with a wolfish grin, though any charming effect it would have possibly had for him was stunted by the tattoo going down the side of his face and the sharp canines. So did the lesson from the last time I kicked your sink in yet? I can do it without my hands if that'll help. He wiggled his fingers tied to his sides earlier by Polly for emphasis. Tashigi immediately set herself in a ready stance, prepared to take him on. You're all trapped. There's no way for you to even get out of the meteor, let alone all the way back to your ship. Just surrender now. Soren just gave her a deadpan stare before opening his mouth to speak. Whatever smart remark he was about to make never came to fruition as he bent his body back almost inhumanly to avoid a slash of Tashigi's sword meant for probably his neck. What the? Soren yelled as he jumped and landed on another awning out of her striking distance. You don't ask someone to surrender and then attack them before getting their answer. It was clear that you weren't going to surrender. You didn't even present your hands. Tashigi said, defending her actions. Hearing that response, Soren got a tick mark on his head and growled at her, that's because I'm tied up already. What do you want from me, woman? Ibi no danmaku, rot barrage. He spat rapid acid bullets at Tashigi that she immediately began dodging as the Marines with her saw why they didn't have a chance once the bullets began to sizzle into the pavement. Eventually Tashigi got through them to reach Soren's awning and slashed it apart in her attempt to get him, missing once he jumped off again and seemingly skipped on the air to get to the roof. As Tashigi attempted to find her own way to take off after Soren, Johnny and Polly stood watching off to the side. Should we, I don't know, get involved and help him out? Polly asked as the female swordsman eventually made her way up to the roof to try and give chase to Soren. Johnny watched as Tashigi made it to the rooftop and again tried to fight Soren only for him to jump from building to building to avoid her. Nah, he's fine. I think he'd be pretty upset if we just crashed his first date like that. Let's leave those crazy kids alone. Polly could see Soren continuing to dodge close-range sword strikes, still tied up by the way, as Tashigi continued trying to dice him up. You're kidding, right? It sounded bizarre, but with the people that he currently associated with it wasn't that much so in the grand scheme of things. Only a little bit though. That's the weird thing about it. Johnny said, adjusting his sungles on his face before paying attention to the Marines ahead of them barring their path. So now what? That was enough to get the Marines to pay attention to them again, the numbers now having increased in the meantime. Get back to the ship. Back to the ship, Polly said, disappointed that he wouldn't get more time to gamble and get his money back. Hey, you can't just leave. Get them. A Marine shouted, getting the lot of them to charge at Johnny and Polly to attack the two men. Polly sighed, breathing out smoke due to his cigar before he sent out several ropes from his clothes in order to grab multiple Marines. Rupu Akushan. Rondo Taunt rope action. Round turn. After grabbing the chosen Marines, Polly spun around and used the men at the end of his lines as makeshift weapons to wipe out the attacking force by the droves. Johnny ran forward once Polly finished his attack and held out an arm. A rope from Polly latched onto him and the shipwright spun around in another circle, using Johnny in the same manner that he did the Marines from just a moment ago as a weapon. A human weapon with a blade. One rotation from him and Johnny managed to cut down dozens of enemies. A second turn led to Johnny cutting himself loose, flying down the street at the other Marines as he bounced off of walls like a pinball, landing in the streets as well to cause havoc. Hanakaru IQ rebound impact. Well, that's one way to clear a path, Polly said as he started to follow behind through the trail of bodies that Johnny happened to be leaving. With Soren, okay, Soren said, jumping away from another slash by Tashigi, landing on another rooftop. I'm really tired of this. If you haven't noticed so far, I'm really drunk. I'm surprised I haven't fallen yet, he said, swaying slightly on his feet before standing back straight up. What is Smoker's problem? How many times do we have to kick his and your ass for him to get the point? You sure do whine a lot for being a part of one of the crews that destroyed Eni's lobby. Tashigi commented before jumping across to Soren's roof, only for him to move again. Why won't you fight me? Like I said, Soren said, still allowing himself to remain tied up, more or less ignoring his bindings. I'm very drunk. And we had a really good reason to go to Eni's lobby. We didn't even destroy it. You guys did that to yourselves. He dodged a swing before letting his body go stiff to block Tashigi's sword with his tekai. Tashigi was stunned by her sword just bouncing off of Soren's body as if he were a rock. However, she didn't give up. You pirates can't just do as you like. The law exists for a reason. The world is bad enough without outlaws like you disturbing what little order there is on the seas. I agree, Soren said, throwing a lazy kick that Tashigi dodged before pulling his leg back, lest he lose it messing around with the woman. And if it wasn't for the fact that tons of Marines don't abide by their own laws, I probably wouldn't be living like this. If Marines don't follow their own rules, then why should I? A series of back got him back out of Tashigi's range again before he threw a kick that fired a blade of compressed air. Renkyaku, storm leg. The swordswoman didn't feel like testing her luck with seeing if she could block the attack and let it pee her by. Whatever happened to you doesn't make the most of the Marines wicked, Tashigi said, not bothering to charge Soren again since she could tell he would have beaten her by now if he had been serious. He wasn't even using his abilities like the last time they fought, thus he didn't see her as a significant threat. A minority of the population shouldn't influence your opinion of the vast majority. You can't even say the same about pirates. Even if you were good, that would make you the minority in that instance. I wouldn't ever talk about myself like that, Soren said, scratching his leg vacantly with his other leg. I'm a horrible bad guy that has a spot reserved for me and when I die, like most pirates. But the rest of the crew are good people. Things aren't black and white. Marines aren't as wholesome as you want them to be. Sometimes the only thing separating them from the pirates they fight are the colors they fly. Tashigi just narrowed her eyes at Soren from the distance they were standing apart. That may be, but until I'm given the opportunity to clean things up, my job is to defeat people like you. You all chose your side. I will beat you one day, and I will bring you in for the things that you've done. I swear it. Soren nodded and turned his back, finally burning his way through the ropes around his body. If you want to beat me, you'd better get faster, and stronger to boot. But feel free to try because I'm never going to kill a Marine like you. The more of you in the world, the better the place is. Maybe you can clean it up. If you can beat me and bring me in, they'll shoot you right to the top. He turned his head to spare Tashigi a glance before giving a wave. Until the next time then. Later. And with that he suddenly left her sight in a burst of speed. Tashigi let out a low growl and sheathed her sword before turning to walk away and find a team to link back up with. There was still an operation going on. Miss Valentine and Nojiko walked out of a clothing store with Perona in tow, and the ghost-generating girl looked far happier now that she apparently had clothes purchased off of the Foxhound pirate belly. You see, we're not so bad, Miss Valentine said with a small laugh. Once you get past the, we tied you to the front of the ship, thing, of course. Nojiko lightly elbowed the bubbly blonde woman. Stop bringing that up. I think she knows that we tied her to the front of the ship by now. She was there. I'm just saying, that probably left a bad impression. Miss Valentine defended for the fact that she had been constantly bringing it up since they had started shopping. She was about to continue talking when she noticed Nojiko freeze mid-step, looking up in the air at seemingly nothing. What's the matter? She asked, knowing that the young woman didn't just zone out for no reason. Nojiko's thousand-yard stare gave way to a pursing of her and a suspicious look at her surroundings before she mumbled lowly, "At least they didn't just storm the shop while we were in there." She quickly grabbed her waiver skates from her supply belt and slung them onto her feet in one motion. Seeing Nojiko grab her practiced method of speedy transportation, Miss Valentine quit holding her umbrella by the middle, holding it by the end to prepare to use it properly as a weapon. She set the parasol weapon over her shoulder and looked around trying to spot anything suspicious. Perona noticed the two of them go on alert and got defensive herself. They were two of the ones that she had been unable to hit before her scuffle with Vivi on the ship, so that had to mean that if they thought something was wrong it was worth paying attention to. "What's wrong? You'll help us fight back to the ship, won't you?" Nojiko asked, subtly moving her hands towards the pair of pistols on both sides of her hips. "It's okay if you don't, it just might go faster if you do." Perona blinked, "But I'm part of a Shichibukai's crew. That kind of makes me off limits, doesn't it?" "I was too, honey." Miss Valentine said matter-of-factly, "It doesn't matter. Shichibukai or not, the Marines don't really like pirates at all. They'll toss you into impel down just because, especially since you're with us and Mariah isn't around either." "I think I'll hang back anyway," Perona said, willing to hedge her bets as an observer for now. If her captives wound up losing to the Marines, she could at least take a chance with the Marines having refrained from fighting them. "Suit yourself but keep up," Nojiko said. "It's time to go now." With that, the Marines appeared standing on the rooftops with rifles in their grasp. Miss Valentine opened her umbrella and took off into the air, drawing the attention and fire of the Marines, while Nojiko took off on her waiver skates, blasting off onto the rooftops to blaze around the Marines trying to ambush them from there. Hearing Nojiko tell her to keep up made Perona want to fight just to show her exactly what was what. Then she actually watched Nojiko fight and realized that the reason she didn't try attacking her astral projection freely during the ship fight was because she would have destroyed the deck in doing so. Nojiko dropped a bunch of grenades around the hapless Marines on the rooftops as she sped past them. They attempted to bail out off of the rooftops prior to the explosives going off, but they detonated regardless and sent an absurd amount of the poor men flying from the blasts they tried to avoid. Anyone still able to get up and continue saw Miss Valentine land lightly on the ground from her diversionary flight and twirl her umbrella as she calmly walked forward through the group of them, batting her eyelashes at them. "All of you against little old me. How unfair." The Marines that got back up drew their sabers and went to attack Miss Valentine all at once. She just calmly lifted her leg high in the air and dropped an axe kick with all of her weight added to the leg of the heel that smashed the ground and caused a small tremor. Shiru o Haukai fu, wind collapsing s. From the air, Nojiko pulled out her swaugen and let off a MIV wind blast that took the form of a large jagged arrow 3 times the size of a normal person that ripped through the maze of Marines stopped by Miss Valentine's tremor, easily sending them flying down the street, picking up more Marines in its wake until it faded. Meanwhile, Miss Valentine was humming a content tune to herself as she used her umbrella as something of a riot baton, skillfully cracking skulls and smashing hapless foes aside with barely any wasted motion from the process. "You can follow along whenever you'd like," she said to Perona as she turned to face the ghost-using girl before using her Hanho feather step to speed through the Marines, beating them so that they couldn't even see her tearing through them. "I know you're having fun and everything, but stop playing Valentine," Nojiko said, hovering by her side after she was done with her arms crossed. "We need to get back to the ship in case I run out of ammo or chakra, or both." "Okay, fine." The dejected sound of Miss Valentine's voice was defeated by the smile that she was still wearing firmly on her face, showing that she didn't particularly care one way or the other. "Did the log pose even reset yet? We've been here for a bit over a day, was that enough time?" Nojiko looked at the directional device on her wrist and saw that it was firmly pointing in a direction instead of looking like it was going haywire the way it had been when they had arrived. "Yes, it's got a new location somewhere that I guess we'll find later, so we need to run." Miss Valentine dodged an attempted armed sneak attack of another Marine and kicked him with crushing force into the side of a building for his insolence before running with her speed technique to keep up with Nojiko on her waiver skates. "We don't have to run. I kind of want to stay and fight. I haven't had a good one in a while," she said before weighing herself down to come to a stop. Not only did they have to wait on Perona, they saw a strange sight directly in front of them. "What in the world?" In front of them blocking the street stood a few hundred Marines with 2 men at the front of the pack in particular. One of them was a man wearing a blue shirt, orange checkered pants, and a Marine cap. Under an eye he had a scar and on both of his fists there seemed to be bolts attached. The other man was more bizarre in appearance, as he wore a Marine bucket hat, heart-patterned glees, a loud yellow and purple button-up shirt and a blue tie with blue pants. At the moment the second man seemed to be swinging a pendulum in front of the M of Marines with him and his comrade. He held his hat down over his eyes as he did so. Okay guys, when I say 1, 2, Django, you will feel 10 times stronger than you've ever felt before. Ready? 1, 2, Django. The look in the eyes of the Marines seemed to turn berserk and they looked at the 2 women with an aggressive gaze. The hypnotist turned to the man with bolts on his knuckles. Okay, now they're ready to attack. These ones won't be so easy to beat full body. The man with the bolts on his knuckles, full body, knocked his fists together and cracked his neck. That hypnotism crap of yours is pretty useful, isn't it, Django? Perona eventually caught up with Miss Valentine and Nojiko as they stared at the Marines barring their way. You too, she said, placing her hands on her knees and panting. I'm not that fast, and I'm carrying stuff. She looked up and saw the multitude of Marines standing in front of them, and I have really bad timing. She said to herself. Before any real fighting could begin, from the back of the pack of the Marines they started to be thrown all about as a trail was blazed straight through the line right to the 3 women that had been prepared to face them. Eventually the sight of what was doing it came into sight. Murat riding on Funkfried with his trunk turned into the straight blade of a sword, swinging his head around as he cleared a path through the enemy forces. You guys. Murat stopped right in front of them after Funkfried broke straight through the thick line of Marines that'd been about to confront the others. Man, you don't know how long it took to find you from where I was. She said with a relieved smile on her face after running into people that she knew again. Looking down at the weapon-turned elephant she was riding upon, she gave Funkfried a pat on the head. He got me all the way here, didn't you? In response the sword elephant trumpeted happily. Nojiko raised an eyebrow. Where'd Yosaku go? He was with you, wasn't he? Ufuku, round trip. Yosaku spun around in one big circle before throwing Kubikiraboucho directly at the Marines that had been warily approaching him in an attempt to corner him. The weapon flew through the crowd of them, cutting them down with the force behind the throw and the pure weight that the weapon held, tearing them asunder. He's a monster. One of the wounded Marines said. He was one of the lucky ones able to survive a cut from the Miv's sword. How can he swing that thing? The sword came back around, flying down from the sky and returning to Yosaku's hands, allowing him to catch the heavy weapon and spin around once to steady himself. After doing so, shut up. The angry power swordsman shouted as he raised Kubikiraboucho over his head. You tried to hurt my beloved and you ruined my date. Prepare yourself for an oblivion of which there is no preparation. Kuruburosu no Hitsuna Koa, Yawl of Cerberus. He then slammed the sword down hard on the ground, sending off 3 blades of energy in different directions that continued to do damage. I don't know. Murat said dryly, still sitting on Funkfried. I'm sure he's doing just fine somewhere. Paying attention to the doctor of the crew, Nojiko quickly drew a pistol and fired, seemingly right at Murat, only to hit a flying circular blade out of the air that was thrown right at her. Once she knew what had occurred, Murat let out a sigh of relief. UWAA, thank you Nojiko. Nojiko nodded before aiming her pistols at Django, who held a pair of chakrams at the ready, the same weapons that had just been thrown at Murat. I'm sorry. Nojiko said, speaking in a sickly sweet voice, I'm just stunned that you attacked a woman from behind that can't really fight. I'd love to see you try that with me though. Before any response could be given or made, Full Body attempted a surprise attack on Nojiko that she managed to avoid with her quick movements on her waver skates. Full Body tried attacking Miss Valentine with his bolt-plated knuckles but only struck her umbrella as she repeatedly blocked him as if she were fencing. Captain Hina and Commodore Smoker have got you all now. You're never getting out of the meteor, let alone off of the island. Just surrender. I'm not going to impel down with bells on just for you, sweetie. Miss Valentine said as the umbrella easily kept Full Body's punches away from her. She eventually smacked him on both knees with the item, dropping him down to them before she used her pointer finger and poked him on the forehead with a bright smile on her face. Kilo Henkin kilogram conversion. And with that, Full Body felt like he was weighed down with crushing force, unable to rise from his place on the ground on his knees. Even staying on his knees looked like it was a strain for him. Murat sat with Funkfried at full attention as he seemed ready to charge back through what was left of the Marines blocking the women. So do we just break on through and find a way out or what? Nojiko still had a glare locked on Django. 1 second, you all can try to get out. I'll catch up. Murat shrugged and pat a spot behind her on Funkfried that Perona didn't need to be told to hop onto as she immediately did so. Miss Valentine let out a laugh as she opened her umbrella and took off into the air over the Marines trying to block them in. That little vengeful streak of yours. Are you sure Naruto hasn't rubbed off on you? Willing to possibly remain behind and trap herself to prove a point didn't seem like a very Nojiko thing to do. A small smirk appeared on Nojiko's face at the comparison. I don't think it's that bad. I think I unlocked a new element anyway. I'm not sure how it'll work though. She pointed one pistol at Django and pulled the hammer back with AC. He tried to move out of the way of the bullet when Nojiko fired. Behind the bullet a thin trail of electricity ripped from the barrel as well, giving a shock to the men that wound up in the aftertrail of the guns. Wow. Django even felt a small shock from the metal chakrams he held for fighting. Whoa. You carry some pretty funky weapons, little miss. They work for me. Nojiko said with a smile on her face at unlocking a third element. I guess feeling confrontational about him trying to hurt my friends unlocked the electricity element for me. Let's see what else works. She pulled her swagan from her back and holstered her pistols as light charged from the barrel of the gun. I don't really know what this one will do, so I'm sorry in advance. She said right before pulling the trigger. Raihak but lightning blast. Observation area of the meteor interior, a MIV blast of electricity arced up from some point in the town before a series of loud crackling explosions that sounded similar to gunswows rang out. What's going on down there, Naruto? Vivi asked, having just heard cannon fire beforehand and then the strange explosions currently echoing through the meteor. They had just been hanging out while she looked through the telescopes provided as a means of leisure. I don't know, give me a second. He said as he sat down on the ground and shut his eyes, beginning to build nature chakra to easily sense his surroundings. After a few seconds of waiting, his eyes snapped open with the orange pigment around the edges and the toad appearance of his irises and he stood back up, dusting his pants off. Oh. Okay, time to go. He said hurriedly reaching out to grab Vivi's hand so that he could keep her with him for a duration back to the ship. Before he could get to the princess to grab a hold of her, a cloud of smoke separated them, trying to wrap around Naruto and cut him off from reaching Vivi. Not a chance, Uzumaki. Hawaito Supauku, white spark. In the MIV cloud of smoke surrounding Naruto, the upper body of Smoker could be seen. You're not cutting and running from this one. Naruto. Vivi shouted, seeing him dodging the top half of Smoker's body while simultaneously trying to avoid getting caught in the solid cloud trail of his smoke. Yeah right. Naruto shouted, avoiding the swings of Smoker's jute, as if all let a ransom like Nefertari Vivi get away. Who do you think you're dealing with? He shouted before delivering a punch to Smoker's torso that actually hit him with his Sage mode active. He can hit me without that sort of his. Smoker's sneak attack was mostly rooted in the fact that he didn't want Naruto to draw Samahata. This was mostly due to his last few conflicts with Naruto shaping his opinion of the rather destructive fighting style of the blonde shinobi. Had the actual events of Eni's lobby become mandatory for other Marines to know, he might have learned of the battle with Aokiji, but much like his previous encounter with Kizaru, no one outside of eyewitnesses or the top bore any knowledge of the Buster Call, the involvement of an admiral, none of it aside from the story of the two crews attacking and destroying Eni's lobby, even though the ships really did so. The punch sent Smoker spiraling into the air, leaving a trail of smoke underneath him that eventually evened him out in the air. The lower half of his body being smoke, Smoker held his stomach with spittle lining his mouth. He had not expected Naruto to actually punch him, he usually just blew him away miles from the site of the battle. He was not going to be able to do that in the meteor of Constellation Island. The walls would keep Smoker's smoke body from being blown far away by any of Naruto's wind attacks. Holding his body from the force of the punch, Smoker glared down at Naruto, who was glaring back up with his abnormal eyes. I wonder if this'll hurt Smoke. He said as he formed a Rasengan in his right hand before closing the fist and coating it in the technique, Senpo, Rasentaiho, Sage Art, Spiraling Cannon. With a punch he swung off the rapid Rasengan projectile. Smoker grit his teeth over his cigar at the sight of the blue blur flying at him at blinding speed, narrowly moving his upper body out of the way to let the Resentaiho smash into the top of the meteor. His smoky trail lower body was inconsequential. If Naruto managed to actually hit him with that, it would do him damage though. Wow. Naruto said, as the Resentaiho didn't even chip a piece of the meteor off. This place is sturdy. The Resentaiho was weaker than a regular Rasengan, but there was still more than enough force behind it to do quite a bit of damage on contact. In Naruto's opinion, it should have at least left a spiral mark on the roof. It would have on a person. A scoff came from Smoker. This hunk of rock fell from space and didn't burn up on entry into the atmosphere. Do you really think you can produce a more damaging force than that? Is that a challenge? Naruto quipped with his arms crossed. As the two bantered to one another, a fence-like cage tried to bar him in, but Naruto was able to avoid it prior to being caught and captured within. Turning to glare at the new arrival that had attempted to attack him. You getting help just to fight me now, Smoker? That's usually a sign that you should leave well enough alone. Smoker growled at the attempted eye stance. Hina, I told you that Uzumaki was mine. Coordinate the forces to keep the rest of his crew in the meteor. Hina is sorry, Smoker-kun. The pink-haired woman said as she walked onto the scene with a smirk on her face, showing that she really wasn't too sorry. She had a cigarette in her hands as she casually spoke, but Uzumaki Naruto is a dangerous man. The entrances to the meteor are covered extensively. A murderous fire of cannon and rifle are there if any of the Foxhound crew tries to leave. They are trapped within. I'm so useless. Vivi thought to herself, fist shaking by her side as she watched what was most definitely about to become a 2-on-1 alt. All she could do was sit aside and be the princess in peril as long as Marines were watching her. All of her training, everything she had done to keep from being a burden, and she was still the albatross around her friend's neck. If word got back to the world government that she had attacked a Marine of any sort, things would not end well for Alabasta. Almost as if Naruto could sense her frustration at her own limitation, he looked towards her and made eye contact, getting her full attention as he gave her a luring smile. Why was he smiling? Suddenly his face turned grave serious and he made a half-ram seal as he used a free arm to point at Vivi. Nefertari Vivi, my entranced slave, you're such a good girl to remain where you are for your Uzumaki-sama. Keep doing that. Hina and Smoker just stared at him with slack-jawed expressions at his declaration, while Vivi just stood in puzzlement of what was occurring. What the air you on, kid? Smoker said to him from above. Ignoring the kid jibe, Naruto broke into a grandiose pose of superiority. Do you think I would freely carry around my hostage without taking precautions? No, the princess is a crafty girl. She's tried to escape me several times before. His grin then turned positively evil at admitting what he was about to say, so I just brainwashed her to make keeping her around easier. Why else do you think she looks so docile at my side? He pointed over at the extremely confused looking Vivi again for emphasis. I mean, look at her. Does she look like she knows what's going on right now in the slightest? She most certainly did not, but that wasn't because she was brainwashed, she just didn't know what the Naruto was talking about or trying to do. It could be possible, Hina said, looking as if she were trying to process the faculties of Naruto's statement. My subordinate Django can hypnotize others, and Uzumaki could possibly do something similar since he isn't a bumbling idiot as far as I've seen. Yeah, as far as she'd seen. She clearly hadn't been around him for a long enough period of time to have a doubt of his mental processes. The princess does look like a dullard right now. The intended or not intended insult put a tick mark on Vivi's head. Vivi will do anything I ask of her the way she is right now. Naruto said with a villainous confidence befitting of a man deemed to be a monster the way he had been labeled in the papers, motioning towards said princess again. If I told her to, she'd attack you both like you were trying to kill someone close to her. At that moment Vivi realized what Naruto was trying to do. He was trying to give her an out for running away, or she hoped to fight. Maybe with any luck, if they pulled off a convincing act, then that could be the excuse that could be used whenever a Marine tried to engage them. It was going to add on to the bad guy label, but it was Naruto's idea and he didn't seem to have a problem with it. Vivi Heim. Naruto said with authority in his voice, enough to actually make the young princess shake a bit until she settled down, knowing that he wouldn't ever hurt her. Please show them what you do to Marines that try to take you away from your Uzumaki-sama. In the back of his mind he was pleading with her to somehow sell this like her life depended on it. They needed to be able to work together because if Vivi was only able to stand there and watch one of the two fighting him could take advantage and try to rescue her, making things way harder. Now at least she could fight back, and if he was able to reach her side and grab her they were as good as gone. Vivi let out an angry growl and pulled her sharp jewel belts off before linking them together in a very long chain and swinging them at Hina. Anything for you Uzumaki-sama, Kujaki ga Shinraidiata P-ranged slasher. She amazingly thrust the weapon out in a straight line like a spear at Hina who was amazed at being attacked by Vivi. The standout Marine captain dodged the attack with quite a bit of effort due to it actually being very fast. Princess, don't listen to him. You are not to be harmed in your retrieval, but Hina does not need to harm you to restrain you. Awase Bowery, lined kimono feather cage. From Hina's sleeve a fence-like cage of bars came out of them, but before it could shut on Vivi she dodged the motion and rushed towards Hina. Did he hypnotize her to make her faster and stronger? She couldn't believe that the previously meek Vivi could move so well. There's my girl. Naruto shouted as Vivi continued to battle with Hina. Hina was not going to be able to trap Vivi with her intensely developed evasive skills. It was as if Hina was tailor-made to adhere to Vivi's strength of dodging since her devil fruit was basically meant to trap others. Well, good luck with trying to trap Vivi. While paying attention to Vivi to ensure his plan was working, he was wide open for an attack that Smoker took full advantage of, barreling into Naruto as he was propelled by his smoke and lifting him off of the ground. Got you. Smoker said as he proceeded to keep Naruto wrapped in his smoke, periodically pummeling him harshly before using the smoke. Naruto was caught in to slam him into the ceiling of the hollowed-out meteor. There's more than enough room for you and yours and impel down. Someone got tougher, Naruto said as he freed his arms from Smoker's smoke and pried his entire body free. He then proceeded to run up Smoker's solidified smoke trail, surprising the man at his balance. Before anything could be done, Naruto drilled Smoker in the face with a hard kick that sent him spiraling back towards the ground. Upon hitting the ground, Smoker's body completely turned into smoke before reforming to his normal appearance. He looked up and his face turned to one of horror as he saw Naruto falling towards him from the sky with a Miv Rasengan in his hand 2/3 his own size. Senpo. Odama Rasengan, Sage Art. Great Ball Spiraling Sphere. With Soren, Johnny, and Polly, a Miv shaking of the ground went through the entire meteor that rattled windows and knocked things over. Johnny almost lost his footing mid-run. What was that, an earthquake? They had been fighting their way through town in an effort to reach the main exit from the meteor. The drawbridge path that led to the outside of the Night Island was their destination since it had been the way in that they had taken. Who cares? Just another reason to get the out of here. Polly said as they turned a corner and wound up on the main street. Oh crap. He said as he shoved both Johnny and Soren back behind the corner as a blast of cannon fire went off, aimed directly at them. More accurately, several cannons, and there were still more that hadn't fired still there. Soren peeked out from behind the corner and quickly ducked back behind when a series of rapid bullets struck nearby. Was that a machine gun? What the? There's another one. Fire. All of the pinned-down pirates looked towards the other end of the main street and saw Yosaku running down it just in time for the cannons to take aim at him. The cannonballs flew at him and he let out an unmanly scream before stabbing Kubikiraboucho into the ground and hiding behind it, letting the most accurate cannonball smash into the weapon, breaking it nearly through the middle and sending him flying backwards a few dozen yards. Ah, what the? He said to himself with a slur in his voice as he got back up with the busted weapon in his hand. This was the opportunity for the Marines pursuing him to pounce on him. Now what are you going to do now that your stupid gorilla of a sword is broken? Sanhyakurokujudo Funke, 360 degrees decapitation. Getting his bearings back as he was surrounded, Yosaku spun in a full circle and brutally slashed the Marines that attempted to take advantage of him with his segmented blade. My sword can't ever break for real. He said as the blood from the fallen enemies began to reform Kubikiraboucho. Johnny's eye twitched at Yosaku's use of his very powerful sword. He never did try to take care of his weapons in battle, now at least he has a decent excuse as to why he doesn't. He then saw Yosaku run like a scared chicken once the machine gun opened fire on him again. Oh yeah. We still have to deal with that. Yudo no Hando, induction backlash. The sound of a Swaugen blast sent out a hard wave of electricity that flew directly at the entrenched positions of the Marines before suddenly expanding in a burst. This burst encompassed the cannons, the machine gun, even the ordinary firearms that the Marines held, somehow causing them to explode. Soren, Johnny, and Polly stood with wide eyes as they had been planning a half-ed three-pronged attack plan to get past the Marine defenses, and yet somehow someone had just annihilated their weaponry in one move. "Well, I certainly feel inadequate," Soren said plainly. "I am not doing that again." Nojiko made her appearance, dropping from her former place on the roof in front of the three men looking a little winded. Lightning takes more chakra than wind for sure. Polly just stared at her as Murat, Perona, and Miss Valentine caught up with them as well. What the just happened? Nojiko tapped her finger off of her Swaugen before slinging it over her back. That attack sends out electricity that can ignite gunpowder through the metal of a firearm. Not mine, since I guess my own guns can handle it if they can fire electricity. The Marines can't seem to take it though. That's totally cheating, by the way, Johnny commented, getting Nojiko to stick her out at him before he pointed at the now clear path. Well, we're wide open now. So let's get out of here before more guys show up to block us off. Constellation Island Meteor Interior Observation Area, Princess Hina yelled as she faced off against the deceptively talented Alabastan princess. Hina and Smoker-kun are trying to help you fight Uzumaki's mind control. I am Uzumaki-sama's princess. Vivi had to hold back a laugh at this point and keep the angry yet strained look on her face. All she had done through the battle was shout in effort and act entranced. So far it had been bought hook, line, and sinker. So she made a show of trying to stop fighting so that Hina would lower her guard, but as the woman's guard seemed to drop, Vivi's hands quickly showed that they were holding the sharp smaller P-slasher jewel weapons on strings attached to her fingers. Her hands quickly had them all spinning on her fingers before sending all 10 of them flying at Hina as small projectiles, difficult to see with the naked eye due to the speed they were released at. Kujaki shooting out P-stinger. All of them were on target, stabbing into Hina's body and knocking her to the ground. A weaker attack than with her now usual powerful cutting weapons that cut her opponents deeper and dealt more damage. The regular string-attached jewels were still incredibly sharp, and Vivi found an even more ranged use for them instead of attacking with them up close, which made little sense. She was a mid-range fighter, able to stay out of an enemy's range with her fleet-footed movements. A few projectiles would only help do more of the same. Before Hina could get back up, Vivi was already over her and delivered a powerful heel drop to the pink-haired Marine captain's chest, driving the air out of her and rendering her unconscious. A series of handsprings allowed Vivi to get her distance back and observe that Hina was not going to be getting back up to keep fighting, putting a smile on her face as she sighed in relief before looking over to Smoker and Naruto fighting a distance away. Naruto's Odama Rasengan probably would have killed him if it had hit. Thus Smoker collapsed his entire body into a plume of smoke that fell apart outwards and allowed the attack and the outpouring energy from it to disperse his smoke outward, where he quickly pulled himself back together, something he had been working on doing since the last 2 times he lost due to being unable to reform from smoke fast enough to continue pursuing or battling Naruto because of his wind keeping his smoke body separated. It took a few seconds for his body to reform, but it was better than the few minutes it had taken in Logatown and Nanohana when they had fought before and his body had been dispersed all around the entire town. You are a real pain in the, you know that. More like you're a pain in mine, Naruto said as more smoke began to billow from Smoker's body. Great, more smoke. Naruto had to punch his way through the gobs of smoke to pound away at Smoker, which was absurdly easy in Sage mode. He was even able to better anticipate Smoker's attacks to respond accordingly. You can't beat me, and just chasing me and trying to corner me isn't going to do it. What are you on about now, Uzumaki? Smoker growled out, almost biting through the cigar in his mouth. You've never put me down, you just keep finding ways to get away. This is the 3rd time we've fought. Naruto said, you're using the same moves that I could have beaten back then without even fighting the way I am now. The first 2 times I didn't know that Sage mode would let me literally kick your Logia. If I did, I wouldn't have been wasting all of that time just blowing you away. It didn't even hurt you. And pain, of course, is the best way to get any point across. With that realization, Naruto's eyes widened. You've never really been beaten up before, have you? It made all kinds of sense. With Smoker's Logia fruit it would have been hard for anyone to hurt him even on the Grand Line, and until leaving Logatown he had been stationed in the East Blue for his entire career, widely perceived as the weakest of the four Cs. Smoker had risen to prominence due to his chasing of Luffy, leading to him getting mixed up in the Alabasta situation where they gave him credit for Crocodile's defeat instead of Luffy. Even then he didn't get hurt, he just got wet and had to be saved from drowning. That was it. Nobody in the East Blue could hurt a Logia user, so seawater was the only thing he really had to look out for at the time. Had anyone even defeated him outside of his marine training? And that was a weakness of Logia users, well, not Aokiji or Kizaru, but definitely Smoker. Their powers were so great immediately after the activation of their powers that growth was difficult, especially in a place like the East Blue. Fighting on the Grand Line was most definitely working for him, as Naruto could notice the difference from the last battle, but it wasn't enough. Smoker had never been pushed before fighting him because no one could hit him, no one that he had actually fought at least. When was the last time Smoker had been given a good thrashing? You don't just keep coming after someone that you can't defeat. Fights don't work like that unless you held out on me the last few times. Naruto said, setting himself in the fighting stance picked up by his long-past training with the Toads. What do you think you changed? Did you figure out some big secret to beating me? No, you haven't done anything that you didn't already try on me. I've never fought you the same way twice, have I? You're just using the same old tricks and relying on your Logia to beat pirates that aren't me. I'll show you the same old tricks. Hawaito Ranchao White Launcher. Smoker launched himself at Naruto in full-on smoking attack form, set to smash into Naruto with his Jute and overpower him with the force of his Logia. Same old trick, Naruto mumbled to himself. He should have long since left, and he probably should have long since Rasenshuriken Smoker back when he realized that the interior of the meteor was very sturdy and put an end to it, but he had a point to prove now as he held both of his arms out in front of his body. Senpo. Rasenkara, Sage Art. Spiraling S. The Rasengan S engulfed his entire body just as Smoker crashed into it and caused a MIV explosion. The smoke from the clash cleared to find Naruto's body standing over Smoker. Smoke was lightly wafting off of his frame, but Smoker didn't generate the force from his charge needed to disrupt the defense and deal Naruto the backlash damage that had occurred in his battle with Kuma. Out cold from running full force into the defensive variation of the Rasengan technique, Smoker's eyes were rolled in the back of his head as he lay flat on his back. You need to never stop improving. You don't have to run your head into the brick wall to get through it, you can go around it or over it. Logia users aren't untouchable or unbeatable, but you're probably not going to listen to me anyway. Vivi ran up to Naruto, seeing him standing over Smoker. Naruto, you won. Yep. Naruto said, dusting his hands off as he walked towards the young princess. You did too, didn't you? The beaming smile on her face told him all he needed to know. She seemed ecstatic at finally getting the chance to fight, and with her new built-in excuse to do so, chances were she'd be doing a lot more of it. Her smile dropped when she realized that they weren't the only ones that could have been attacked. Ah. What about everyone else? They were in town while we were up here. Do you think they're alright? She asked worriedly. They're fine. Naruto said, still able to sense signatures due to being in Sage mode. They're on their way back to the ship now, they got out of the meteor. That means it's our turn to go too. You ready? Vivi nodded and wrapped both of her arms around Naruto's neck. Alright, hold on. Both of them then disappeared in a flash, leaving the two unconscious officer marines behind. So this kind of thing happens to you guys all the time, huh? Verona asked as they were sailing away from Constellation Island. Having attacked from the backside of the island, the Marines were unable to move fast enough to the front side of the island to corner the far faster natural disaster, allowing the Foxhound crew to get away without any real issue. Must be a real pain. Still, the fact that they had fought their way out of the rat's nest of Constellation Island was something she had to admit was impressive. Nojiko shrugged as they sat in the common area. She was taking the time to clean her guns after the extensive use they had just seen. It's more annoying than anything else now though. This is the fourth time Smoker tried to mess with us. I think he chased after us all the way from San Salvacion Island. Murat popped in from down the hall where her office room was. Does that mean he chased us through the comm belt or just waited for us to get back onto the Grand Line? A series of unknowing shrugs happened to be the response. Probably the latter since they hadn't been attacked during one of their unplanned detours. Naruto Anaki's going to have us making tracks to get some distance this time though. I think he's really sick of running into Smoker. Yosaku chimed in from the kitchen where Miss Valentine was overseeing the grazing that he and Johnny were trying to do while she was making dinner. Soren's going to be pissed though. At that, both swordsmen grinned mischievously and had to believe that Soren was lucky to not be in the room at the moment, otherwise he'd be getting razzed about his run-in with Smoker's swordswoman subordinate. Speaking of Naruto, someone go and get him. Miss Valentine said, leaning against a counter in the kitchen. The food is almost ready and I don't want him not eating on time again. He'll just sneak stuff out of the pantry and the fridge later after everyone else is done and he doesn't know how to snack with moderation. Yeah, okay, I'm on it. Nojiko said, getting herself up to head outside to the helm to inform Naruto to come inside to eat. As she went outdoors and walked up the stairs to the steering area, she stopped at the top of the stairs and shook her head with a smile on her face at what she saw. Naruto sitting against the steering column with Vivi leaning against his shoulder, both of them asleep with Karu nearby doing the same. The lack of sunlight had been messing with Naruto's internal clock for days and she didn't think he had slept 8 hours in around a week since they had gotten in the area, with that and the fact that he had to stay up to make sure the ship didn't crash into anything in the dark. Everybody on the ship knew that Vivi was hard of sleeping and didn't get very much of it ever. It was amazing that she was as energetic as she was when even Murat couldn't tell where she got it all from with as little rest as she got. Needless to say, the two of them were the ones that needed a few hours of shuteye more so than anyone else on the ship. And it looked so cute with Vivi leaning against Naruto's shoulder comfortably that she couldn't wake them up right then. They could eat later, food could be saved for them if Miss Valentine was asked to do so. Good night you guys, or morning, Nojiko said quietly as she turned and decided to head back inside. I don't really know what time of day it is right now. She finished with a yawn. Omake. 21 Constellation Island Meteor Interior Starlight Casino. As Polly sat at the blackjack table in the casino of his choice, Soren and Johnny just stood back watching over his shoulders and drinking at the same time. The entire time there had been a how-to of what to do in a casino to lose all of your money in the most way possible. It had been really entertaining for them. You've got 20. The card dealer said to the shipwright who was steadily smoking away on a cigar while playing. Hit me. Polly said with a nonchalant kind of confidence that can only come from years of experience, or idiocy. Soren put a hand on Polly's shoulder before he could make the hand motion for a hit. I don't think that's such a good idea, dude. It was funny at first, but seeing Polly lose repeatedly was starting to get old, and the question of his mental state while gambling was beginning to come into question. No one could be that bad at games like this. It was just impossible. It was like he was trying to on purpose. Polly shrugged him off and tapped his finger on his cards. Hit me. Soren and Johnny both palmed their faces at being so casually ignored. 21. The look of shock that then appeared on the two observers' faces would have made for a fantastic quote. Did he just win? Johnny asked in disbelief. What were the chances of being dealt an ace? It was absolutely absurd, but it looked like Polly had proven them wrong. Hit me. Polly said again nearly robotically as if he wasn't aware of the fact that he had just won, and technically he really hadn't since the dealer hadn't had the chance to declare him as winner since there were others that still had turns to take. Dude, Soren said, trying to inform him that there was no better deal to receive than 21. He was going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory if that were even possible. Hit me. Polly said again for emphasis, and of course the willing dealer did just that. It wasn't his money. That's 30. Polly looked down at his cards blankly before looking around at Soren and Johnny who were just in awe, and not in the good way. Shrugging his shoulders, Polly turned his attention back to the dealer. Hit me. And he did get hit. By a pair of bottles over the back of his head by his own crewmates that decided to save him from himself. Johnny dragged Polly away from the table by the collar of his jacket while Soren carried all of the booze with him. Do you think he'd be better at roulette or should we just quarantine him at the penny slots? Chapter 37. Lovely little shade of gray, yes. Naruto said, sitting with his arms crossed on a couch in the common area, almost looking like he was pouting since he was looking to his left, away from the person he was actually speaking to. No. Nojiko replied, trying to bore a hole into Naruto's head with her gaze as she sat next to him on his right. Yes. I'm doing it. It's got to be faster. Naruto said, trying to insist upon his point. He jumped up out of his seat and walked to the window to point at the Titanic landam blocking the ship's way. I can totally climb that. It might take a day, or more, but yeah, I can climb that. You're the only one that can. Nojiko yelled, fing him in the nose to elicit a yelp from him. We can't even see the top of it. No one we know ever has, and unless you get permission to do it they'll just shoot us off anyway if you try. And what about the ship? I've thought about that. Naruto said to the navigator of his crew, I'll get Polly to tie ropes around me and like 1,000 clones. I think we could make it. That's if the clones could all stick to the wall with their chakra. Take the strain of having to lug a ship up a 90-degree angle for miles before dragging it across however long the top of the landam was before dropping it back into the ocean. It can't be that big of a climb. Actually, forgetting about the clones and ignoring them for a moment, could the ship itself even take all of that abuse? It would be bouncing off of the wall again and again. The keel would probably snap like a twig before even half of that journey was done, even if the red line wasn't that tall. Almost in complete sync, the entire crew and Perona punched Naruto in the head, sending him to the floor. You're not trying to drag the ship up the red line. They all yelled at him as they stood over his fallen body. What the are you trying to do? Soren yelled at him, acid generated by anger forming a steam rising from his body. Why are you so freaking weird, Uzumaki? There is normal way to do everything, including something like this, ways that are possible and not completely asinine. Do you know how close we are to Marineford? They'd find you climbing that thing, with a ship attached to you and a ton of clones, and shoot you right off the wall. Fine. Naruto yelled, nursing the 10 lumps on his head with tears forming in his eyes. Then how the do you suggest we get across this time? Jumping off of the comm belt isn't going to do anything this time like it did when we got to the Grand Line from the East Blue, since this stupid red line wraps around the planet. No reverse mountain attempt even if they had tried it the first time, which they hadn't at the logical breakdown of them owning a marine ship at the beginning of the crew's inception. Any route to reverse mountain that they could find would just dump them back at the start of the Grand Line. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Perona cut in, waving her hands around from her seated position back in a chair. What makes you think I'd actually go with you guys all the way to the New World? Mariah-sama took a crew there before he got me to join him and they got torn apart. No way I'm going there with you like it's some kind of day trip. Okay. Soren said, leaning against the door leading to the deck. Feel free to jump ship and hope for the best all by yourself the very next time we make port. That should work out just swimmingly for you. I'm not some weakling. Perona argued back at the acid-spitting man before turning her back with her arms crossed haughtily. I don't need a crew. If I desire company or I stance I'll just procure some helpers, but none of you are cute enough for my tastes to work for me. Who's not cute? Miss Valentine, Murat, and Nojiko all said with deceptively sweet voices that promised pain if the correct answer was not given by the tagalong Perona. Vivi put a hand under her chin as she started pacing around and thinking to herself, well, we can go to Sabayati, we should be able to find a way over or around the red line from there. If we can't then there's nowhere we can go to do it. She nodded firmly, deciding that it was the best course of action. Yes, we should go to the Sabayati archipelago. It's where my father's ship stops from Alabasta whenever he had to go to Marijoy. They would always send representatives to accompany us from there. It's the best place to go. Nojiko figured that was as good an idea as any. It was definitely better than trying to drag the natural disaster up the side of the red line by use of clone power. She doubted that it was even possible. It was absolutely huge to climb and their ship was utterly miv. It had way too much space for all of them even with all of the added things done in Water 7, okay. The guy that talked to us on Constellation Island said it wasn't far from there. Let's move a ways away from the red line and venture further away from the comm belt. If it's really that close then it shouldn't be hard to find. Still not convinced of the current plan of action, Naruto grumbled his disagreement. I still think you should hitch a few ropes to me and my clones and have us try to scale the red line. I mean, wouldn't that just be awesome? There was no affirmative response from the crew as they all did their best to ignore him. You guys really sometimes you know that. Later that day, sitting on the GR-covered deck to meditate was often how Naruto kept himself in touch with the power swimming within himself. For decades he had been randomly doing so just to keep a touch on the surroundings he found himself around, as well as in order to gauge his own powers in comparison to others. As far as people on the ship went, he could easily judge their combat capabilities in comparison to his. Throughout the ship he could feel the very different energies of his crew. The easiest to sense was Soren's. It was a steadily growing power that one didn't need ability to sense to feel. His training with the Rokushiki styles at this point made it so that his physical presence was always radiating some kind of power. It was somewhat untamed, but that came with the unstable territory of his devil fruit powers. The scariest thing about it was that he learned from conversing with CP9 that he could channel his devil fruit abilities into the Rokushiki 6 styles. That would be an intimidating concept once he got the practice down. The next up on the power scale of his crew was surprisingly Miss Valentine. Her aura was always calm and even, something that went right along with her normal demeanor. At first believing that her powers restrained her to being a strictly support fighter, flying and crashing to the ground, her style had developed extensively since joining the crew with advice from others, mostly him, on how to use them in new ways that she hadn't thought up herself. Her speed with the specially developed Hanho feather step was absurd, and her ability to weigh a foe down with a touch was a boon of an ability even when she chose not to swing around her umbrella to crack skulls. Johnny and Yosaku were more or less even as far as he could sense. While they specialized and went into two completely different directions as swordsmen, the development was incredible. Johnny's foot and sword draw speed improved every day due to his self-imposed training, to the point where he would rather resheath his sword and try quick-draw attacks than engage in traditional sword fights. Yosaku's growing strength was scary. Getting Miss Valentine to weigh down Kubikiraboucho with her powers for him to train with was working aces for him. The weight seals placed on the sword to activate upon being unstrapped from the harness, and his own strength gave him the ability to break steel with the amount of force he could generate. Nojiko was a devilishly accurate SWAU, and with what they now knew to be her haki, she had limited precognitive abilities in combat, and now that she was able to move freely with her waver skates, her mobility could actually allow her to act on the haki by moving around accordingly. With just normal firearms she would be scary for someone to fight, but he might have potentially given her more power than she knew what to do with when he fixed her guns with seals. The three elements available to her were wind, fire, and lightning, each with their own advantages in combat and their own particular drain on her chakra reserves that were being flexed with every elementally charged SWAU she fired. Vivi could dodge almost anything sent at her without moving out of a 5-foot radius of her starting area, something that Karu had picked up as well, giving Vivi a mounted ult that was more than just a straight-on charge the way it was when they had first met. She was also finding new methods of which to utilize her very versatile dual weapons. One had to wonder when she had gotten so many to use in combat. Polly had a pretty strong aura going for him as well. Still, he hadn't been seen going all out before, but he hadn't seemed like he had been in over his head since the ult on Eni's lobby, so it was only a matter of playing the waiting game to give a fair opinion on him. He was easily able to handle everything sent their way since he joined the crew though. Murat didn't fight, instead opting to teach Funkfried tricks. Said tricks were often of the violent variety and mostly involved the sword elephant using its given abilities to keep her out of trouble and keep her safe. She didn't seem as tentative about everything as she did upon joining, but she still knew she was most certainly not a fighter by any stretch of the imagination, which was just fine. She was meant to be the healer, not another warrior. His thoughts gave way to Karu pecking him in the side of the head, prompting him to grab the duck in a side headlock. "Oi. What's up with you?" Karu let out a quack that Naruto was able to understand. "I don't know if you can come with us off of the ship this time." "I'm not your owner, ask Vivi Heim. I don't see why you're coming to me about this." Another quack came from Karu as he tried to wrestle out of Naruto's weak, unserious grasp. Quack. Naruto let the desert-dwelling duck go and raised an eyebrow. "She would not do anything I ask her to do. The stuff I made her do was training, that's why she listened to me back then." Karu pecked him in the head and let out a quack that sounded akin to a sigh, saying that he was a fool, getting Naruto to shake the duck repeatedly. "What? Who's stupid? I'll chuck you overboard, you duck. Say something again and I'll make Peking pigeon out of you." In response, Karu pecked Naruto in the head repeatedly and turned the skirmish into a wrestling match on the deck. "Oh, you bad guy. What are you two doing?" Both Naruto and Karu stopped fighting to see Vivi standing right there, looking at them suspiciously as her foot tapped the ground repeatedly, waiting on an explanation. Karu took advantage of the lull in the action to continue pecking Naruto in the head with free swaus as he tried to explain, "I'm just messing around with the duck Vivi Heim. It's cool. I love nature." He stopped Karu's beak from pecking him once he was finished. "Seriously, do that again and I'm tying you to the front of the ship." "I really doubt that," the Alabastan princess said, standing there with her hands on her hips, "but I can't bring myself to think of a reason why you two would be fighting or to really care since you're not serious." "Quack, quack," Karu said, prompting Naruto to look at him and nod in understanding as the two got up off of the ground. Naruto cleared his throat and prepared to speak to Vivi, prompted to do so by Karu, who more or less quacked at Naruto to put his money where his mouth was towards the point they had been fighting over. So hence it was put up or shut up time over the main point of their miniature conflict, Vivi Heim. "I was just thinking, you should get a tattoo, right here," he said, grabbing her arm and pointing at her bicep. "It would be awesome." No way she'd ever do that. Listening to his input was one thing because he was the captain and her trainer, but getting a tattoo? "Really?" she said, looking at the area on her arm that she was directed to pay attention to. "I mean, I never thought of it, but if you think it would be a good idea, I don't see why not." Vivi seemed to be seriously contemplating getting a tattoo. "I mean, Nojiko has a tattoo and Nami does too. It wouldn't look bad on me, would it?" Well, maybe she would do anything he asked her to. That was almost cool. Naruto had the complete trust and faith of the princess of a powerful nation. Most guys probably would have found some underhanded way to take advantage of that, but even if he was that kind of guy, Vivi was too sweet to take advantage of. Naruto looked at Karu and the victorious look the duck had on his face before sighing. "Yeah, okay, when we disembark you can come with us this time," he said in defeat. To the victor went the spoils. Now he had to convince Vivi to not get a tattoo, because if she did, then Agaram, Chaka, Pell, Koza, and even Cobra himself would probably try to kill him for it. "No tattoo, Vivi Heim, even though it wouldn't look bad on you, you're too cute to get one." "But you just said." Vivi tried to dispute, a blush on her cheeks from being called cute. "I know," Naruto said, waving off his previous tattoo comment, "but your bird was pecking me in the head, so maybe it was the concussion talking. My mind is clear now. No tattoo." He saw her scrunch her nose in thought, putting a bit of alarm into his heart. "No tattoo. Say it with me, no tattoo." "Fine," Vivi said, finally giving up the thought if he was really insisting against it. "I won't get a tattoo." "But pirates have tattoos of their Jolly Roger a lot of times, don't they? What's wrong with me getting one of our crews? The fact that we're not pirates, and I wish people would recognize that," Naruto said with an irritated growl. Their Jolly Roger didn't even look that much like anyone else's at all. Sometimes it didn't even look like one, period, and the fact that you're a princess of a country. He then smirked at her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Have you paid attention to the flag though? It's a skull version of my face. If you got that kind of tattoo, it would probably say a lot more than you being a member of this crew." Realizing that he was right and that the Jolly Roger was more or less a skull version of Naruto, Vivi realized what such a thing could be taken as by an outside observer. Not even that, there was no way such a thing would ever be allowed to die even among the crew as a joke of her being Naruto's property, due to the tattoo. Instead of just her cheeks, this time Vivi's entire face turned red as she started sputtering nonsensically in emberment. "Should I go for the kill here?" Naruto thought to himself as he noticed Vivi's mortified appearance. There was something else tattoo-wise he could say that would probably stick with her for life due to its connotation, but then again she was only 16 and fairly naive, and he didn't want to break her. Okay, so no joke about other possible places to put the tattoo in case she's embered about getting it on her arm where everyone could see it, hinting that only I would see the other places because they're private. That's too far for Vivi Heim, she'd never talk to me again. Joke not being told and reaction not being given. The thing to take from the conversation was that Naruto had successfully diverted Vivi from getting a tattoo that he almost convinced her to get in the first place because of a point that had to be proven for an argument with a duck, that he lost. Some time later, either that place is real or I'm still drunk from breakfast. Soren said to himself aloud from his position in the crow's nest as he looked at the landmark on the horizon. Well, I have a feeling that you're just going to love this next place, nature boy. He yelled down the mast so that he could be heard, but I have no idea what it is. Hearing the commotion from the acid-spitting man up top, Naruto grabbed a pair of binoculars and looked out front at the landmark he was talking about. Whoa. Is that a bunch of islands made of trees? A grin crossed his face as he continued to look. That's just cool. He could probably absorb enough nature chakra to go sage mode in a single second in that place, second only to the mountain he originally trained the technique on. Able to hear the commotion from Soren about trees, Vivi walked over to Naruto and grabbed the binoculars from him, a small smile coming to her face as she saw the M of sturdy and large trees that had the attention of the other two. That's Sabayati Archipelago. It's not an actual bunch of islands, it's just a M of trees big enough for people to live on. A mangrove forest. If there's a way to get past the red line, we'll definitely find it here. Johnny had a grin on his face as he heard that they were close to landing the ship somewhere once again. That's great. I wonder if there's anyone strong here to fight. He grabbed the binoculars from Naruto and got a good look at the archipelago. It looks lively enough from here. No. Absolutely not. Hearing Vivi's sudden outburst got everyone on the deck's attention, and it almost gave Soren enough of a jolt to get him to fall out of the crow's nest. The princess in question had a very serious look on her face and seemed to be looking at all three men with some anger in her eyes. What's the matter, Vivi Heim? Naruto asked, wondering what had nearly set her off just now. Vivi pointed at him sternly, getting him to take a step back before she switched to pointing at Johnny and then at Soren. If we're going to go here, then all three of you are going to have to be good for once. Seriously. No messing around this time, and I'm not kidding one bit. No starting trouble, understood? Why? Soren asked. He rather liked starting trouble, or at least taking part in some kind of debauchery. It would be a rather hard habit to kick cold turkey. We get into trouble pretty much everywhere else, so what's the deal with this place? There was probably a good reason if Vivi of all people felt the need to speak up and tell them so. Usually Nojiko would be the one to tell them all to stay out of trouble, but she said it so much they barely listened to her anymore. She usually didn't even end up heeding her own advice anyway. But Vivi never raised her voice with any kind of authority, hence why they were paying close attention to her. In order to answer his question, Vivi pointed at the island. You can't just do as you like here. There's a marine base stationed on the southern side of Sabayati Archipelago, and we're so close to both Marijoy and Marineford that if you started a mess here, it wouldn't take too much to turn a whole major incident out of it. So please just stay away from the southern end of the area altogether. You make it seem like we're going to go out of our way to look for trouble. Naruto said, almost pouting at being put on the spot. When he looked at Vivi, he saw her glaring at him particularly hard. In particular, what's the matter? Vivi got up in Naruto's face, unnerving him at how completely grave she was being. This was clearly not something to take light of, at least as far as Vivi was concerned. I want to hear you promise me that you are not going to fight anyone here. No one. I don't care if you see someone about to die in front of you, you don't fight. His face twisted into a frown at that thought, and Vivi's face softened considerably, but she stayed firm. Promise me none of you are going to get into trouble here. It's too important. So this would be like at Water 7, only here things were close enough to the enemy's gate, so to speak, that the usual sweetheart, easygoing Vivi felt the need to urge just how quickly things could degenerate. They all could have said that they were going to do whatever they wanted, and honestly it was expected of Soren to do just that. Thus it was rather surprising when all three of the men in the presence of Vivi all simultaneously spoke at the same time. Fine, I promise. Naruto, Soren, and Johnny all looked at each other and shrugged at the strange occurrence. Vivi blinked at the whole speaking in unison thing before a relieved smile came over her face and she leaned against the steering wheel of the ship. You mean it, right? She asked, getting nods from all three as Soren climbed down from the crow's nest. Good, and I really can't stress this enough, do not pick fights with anyone, you can't do as you like. And if you see a world noble, do not do anything to them, just bow like everyone else. That's all. Bow. Both Naruto and Soren thought, grimacing at the notion. Naruto hadn't bowed to anyone in over 120 years of life, with the exception of the time he had begged the Raikage to spare Uchiha Sasuke's life. And Soren was not about to bow down to anyone period, he was too much of an anarchist to give a about the useless figurehead nobles. In the case of seeing a world noble, they would probably be better advised to simply vanish if they saw one, because they were not going to bow. They both knew that right then and there. As a matter of fact, as far as Soren was concerned. Can't I just? No, you cannot melt the world noble, Soren. I will cut you. Soren recoiled at the jolt from Vivi yelling at him and fell off of the mast he had been climbing down. Luckily his neck broke his fall and he jumped right back up with a lump on his bald head. You're getting a touch of the sociopathic tendencies from Uzumaki, aren't you? Vivi blushed at being called out on her outburst and chose to just walk away. I've been on a ship with all of you for months now. It had to happen eventually. But do not mess with the world nobles. Seriously. She said as she went back inside the ship to wait for them to reach Sabayati and inform all of the others. Johnny just watched where Vivi had been previously standing and then turned to both Naruto and Soren. You're not going to listen to her, are you? He said in a voice that more or less already expected the answer to be no. He would be pleasantly or not so pleasantly surprised by his captain's answer though. I have to, even if I did want to do something stupid. Naruto said in a disenchanted tone of voice. She made me promise it. You soft bad guy. Soren jibed in return, not mentioning the fact that he had promised to be on good behavior as well. Oh, shut up. Naruto snapped half-heartedly before sighing. She has a point anyway. We need to figure out what to do to get past the red line first, even if we did get an itch to cause some trouble. It wouldn't do to make a mess of things without even getting the reason that they'd be going to Sabayati Archipelago for in the first place, so he'd have to choke down his first instincts for the first time since Water 7 to raise havoc. That meant no reacting to others either, which probably wouldn't be as hard as it was on Jaya in Mock Town. They probably weren't the only crew there that would be put on very short leashes while there, so at least there was the chance that others wouldn't be spoiling for fights either. Sabayati Archipelago Grove 23 of 79 lawless area. You seriously need to take it easy, Naruto. Miss Valentine said as she took note of Naruto walking around with a scowl on his face. What's the matter? You look all kinds of upset and we just got here. She asked as he walked around alongside her, ignoring the bubbles floating about and the people in the streets. He didn't voice it aloud, but just being in that place was putting a damper on his usual mood. He had gone into sage mode before getting off of the ship to look around the island for information and wound up feeling a lot of negative feelings despite the abundance of nature in the form of the very powerful mangrove trees that could reach the ocean floor. Naruto's ability to sense most lifeforms in the area due to sage mode and his latent skill to feel the emotions of said people due to another talent of his originally overwhelmed him. There were a lot of people that were happy or at the very least content. In fact, the vast majority were, but on the other end of that he also felt a lot of distress from one particular area toward the middle of the archipelago. They had landed around the 23rd grove and had docked there. Each tree was large enough to be designated as its own particular island for people to live, build places, and operate normally on, thus they were designated groves for each tree that comprised the place. The part that they had stationed the natural disaster in was the place where most pirates, bounty hunters, and other lawless individuals hung around. From that point the crew had split up for their own means. Soren had gone into town to find somewhere to get a drink and wound up being followed by Johnny and Yosaku. Nojiko had gone with Vivi and Karu to buy supplies and just overall shop. Polly stayed on the ship and stayed busy with a quick maintenance check while they were in a place to rest, willing to take Vivi's warning to heart and knowing full well that there was no way they'd be able to stay out of trouble. With him on the ship was Perona, his prisoner. She was getting to be very annoying since she wanted to leave the ship and explore, but her warden, Polly, was not about to step one foot off of the ship to do so. This left a very grumpy Naruto who originally intended to go off on his own. He did not get to do so however, because Miss Valentine quickly followed him. No one was really supposed to be left alone in a strange place, so she was in the right and he couldn't fault her for following his own crew instructions, but that didn't mean he had to like the way it ended up. Valentine-chan, you should really go find someone else. Naruto said, trying to keep the ire from the feeling he had felt while sensing this place out of his voice for her benefit. It wasn't her fault or her problem, it had just been a very long time since he had tried to tap into his energy that allowed him to feel people's emotions. There had simply been no need. I'm not going to be a whole lot of fun here. Well, we'll have to make it fun, won't we? Laughing as she did so, Miss Valentine jumped onto Naruto's back as light as a feather and held on tightly. I propose a game. Whenever I ask you something and you don't give me a direct answer, I'll put more and more weight on. You'd better consider the things you say carefully or you might end up in a crater. Hearing the terms of the game got Naruto to feel some trepidation over his chances. One way or the other, can't I just take you to the amusement park? This place has and be done with it. Miss Valentine let of a scoff with her ever-present smile still plastered on her face. An amusement park. I can fly higher than any ride and move faster than any roller coaster can. What's the fun in that? And what am I? 8. She gestured grandly to the maze of possible pirates, bounty hunters, and other lowlifes in the vicinity. This is where I consider the fun to be. It's definitely better than hanging around a bunch of boring normal people all day. Rolling his eyes but admitting that she was in the same vein of thinking that he had, Naruto felt the need to comment on something. I don't get what's so lawless about this place. I mean, pirates hang out here and everything, but other than that, nothing cool or lawless. At that point, a man was thrown out of a window in front of them on the street and jumped up with a few gashes on his face to get back inside of the building, only to get hit with a wooden chair that splintered over his head and rendered him unconscious. Both Naruto and Miss Valentine looked inside to see many patrons of a bar in a raucous fight while many others just cheered them on, some contributing by throwing empty bottles into the fray. Seeing this put a mischievous gleam in Miss Valentine's eye that Naruto was unable to see from her place on his back. Ooh, can I? No, Valentine-chan. Vivi Heim told us to stay out of trouble. Yeah, and trouble qualifies as something we're not supposed to do to normal law-abiding citizens. Pirates, bounty hunters, and other people like that don't count. As long as we're in this part of Sabayati Archipelago, we can do whatever we want as long as we don't go overboard. She obviously didn't go anywhere near this part of town when she came here with her father. Who would take a princess to see this? At Valentine's query, a man stripped of his all clothes ran out of the bar and down the street, giving everyone on the street quite a show. This was something that Naruto had to admit proved her point to an extent. So you're saying that as long as we don't mess with anyone important enough like one of the world nobles Vivi Heim seems so scared of, and as long as we stay here we can do anything we want. Fate seemed to answer his question when a man inside of the bar pulled out a pistol and fired it in the air to end the fight and clear everyone out. It had the opposite effect though, as upon hearing a gunswow the combatants all started pulling out their own guns and began a shootout. It seems like it. Miss Valentine sounded quite pleased with that bit of information, as being all demure and keeping the peace didn't particularly appeal to her from the start. With Soren, Johnny, and Yosaku Grove 13 Shaki's rip-off bar. Okay, first it was funny when you said 100,000, but seriously. 20,000 belly for a bottle. Soren raged as he sat at a bar, almost foaming acid from the mouth in disbelief. Are you out of your rabbit mind? I am not paying that much for a drink. For that much money, the drink better give me a full head of hair and make women fall in love with me at first glance. The woman behind the bar stood with her cheek in her hand as she leaned against the counter, an amused look on her face. She had short black hair, a pink t-shirt with a black spider on it that revealed a bit of her cleavage, a black jacket over that with a gray stripe down the sleeves and black frills at the ends of the sleeves and the collar, a yellow bead necklace, a pair of pants with an odd pattern, and white shoes. She let out a plume of smoke from the cigarette in her hand she had been smoking before speaking to Soren. Well, for all you know those things could happen, so why don't you just buy the booze and find out? Soren gave the woman a dry look and pointed at Johnny and Yosaku, who were both enjoying the exact same drink Soren himself was trying to purchase, because I'm not stupid like them. They're going to go back to Uzumaki and try to bum some money off of him, and they're going to be in for a rude awakening. Now could you give me a more reasonable price here? I'm begging you. The grin that came to the woman's face got Soren's eye to twitch in annoyance. It doesn't sound like you're begging at all. You don't sound like you really want the drink if you ask me. Please lower the price so I can get drunk, please. Soren growled out lowly. Steam from his own acid began rising off of his body at having to jump through hoops just to get a touch of alcohol. He would have just left, but Johnny and Yosaku didn't seem to want to leave anytime soon, and he didn't want to blow any more time looking for another bar while sober. He had to be good and drunk if he wanted to wander around some new place aimlessly, otherwise it wouldn't work out so well. Well, since you asked so nicely. The bartender said, pulling up a bottle of Soren's desired drink and putting a smile on his face before she uttered the price again, 5,000 belly. Muttering to himself about how that was still 5 times more than normal, Soren reached into his wallet and fished out a 5,000 belly mark, handing it over for his bottle. So how in the world do you actually get business with up prices like these? He asked curiously as he spit on the top of the bottle and melted the cork off. Or kind of famous because of it. The woman said, watching Soren drink with interest. Or did the name, Shacky's Rip-Off Bar, mean nothing to you when you walked in here? In fact, it hadn't meant anything when they had all walked in. We just thought that was some kind of catchy name to net some customers, Soren admitted in a deadpan tone of voice, and I'm guessing that you would be Shacky then. Shakuyaku at your service, but if you actually call me that I'll kick you out. Shacky said with a smile. And I know you as well, Soren, the plague. Quite a high bounty you sport, 251 million. She nodded her head over towards Johnny and Yosaku as they were unaware of anything currently happening. Those two aren't bad, but meh. Soren took a deep swig before setting his bottle down and wiping his mouth, looking at Shacky with some suspicion. You know who we are that easily. I keep an eye out on the new blood. Shacky said, taking a drag from her cigarette, and you and yours are rather interesting. You and your captain have absurdly high bounties, even for rookies. I'm not a rookie. Soren defended with a frown. He'd been running up and down the beginning part of the Grand Line for years. He had been born on the Grand Line. But then again, on the other hand, he wasn't an active pirate until was forced to join Naruto's crew more or less by way of impressment, so he technically was a rookie, but we're not pirates anyway. At least Naruto kept urging that they weren't. Whatever you have to tell yourself. Laughed Shacky at Soren's flimsy excuse. You know you guys aren't as scary as the papers swear that you are. If you read those things they make it sound like Uzumaki drowns puppies for fun and you personally eat babies. Of course Soren doesn't eat babies. Yosaku chimed in from their stools at Soren's side, he and Johnny finally paying attention to their friend's conversation with the bartender. How could you even say something like that? Nodding in agreement with the power swordsman, Soren took another drink before speaking again. Yeah, I don't eat babies. That's absurd. Another drink and he added on to his previous comment, babies have little to no nutritional value. If you want to eat kids you have to wait until they get around 5 years old. Any older than 13 though and they get all tough and hard to chew. Thank goodness for the EB no MI on that front though. And the thing that stopped the bar cold, even his own crewmates, was that he had a completely serious expression on his face when he said that. All Soren did instead of elaborating on his morbid and very disturbing statement was finish off his bottle all at once before frowning at the lack of content within. Drained by his own thirst. Oi, can I get another? He asked, fishing around in his pocket for his wallet again. Before he could get his money out to pay, hoping that Shacky wouldn't jack up the price again, another bottle was placed directly in front of him. Soren looked up to see Shacky shaking her head. This one is on the house, baby eater, Soren. Soren looked at her with a raised eyebrow until his eyes widened in horror. Oh no. I swear to God that better not stick or I'm going to kill somebody. Johnny and Yosaku were able to get a few laughs at Soren's expense as he grumbled and melted the cork off of his second bottle before starting in on it. With the bar back to normal after the previous uncomfortable comment, Johnny decided to make some conversation as well. So you know Soren. Do you know about us too? Shacky nodded and began busying herself with the cleaning of glees. How much? Enough. Shacky said cryptically. It's kind of creepy though. You're the 9th big-time rookie crew on the Grand Line to reach this place at once. Weird timing. 9th big-time crew. Now that was a topic of interest to Yosaku. There were other crews perceived as being rival strong to the Foxhound crew there as well. Who else is here? With Nojiko, Vivi, and Murat Grove 45 tourist shopping area happily wandering out of a store while holding onto a string connected to a floating bubble that contained all kinds of shoes and new clothes, Nojiko walked over to a cafe where she found Vivi and Murat sitting and waiting with Karu napping right next to them. The doctor of the pair had a somewhat wistful look on her face, something that Nojiko addressed. I didn't expect you guys to actually be waiting out here when I got out of that store. What's with Murat by the way? Vivi shook her head with a frown on her face. I don't know. We went looking around and split up for a bit to look in different stores. I saw her go into a medical supply store because she said that the boys were burning through her supplies by being dumb all of the time, and when I came back out she was sitting here looking like this. She waved her hand in front of Mireille's face, getting her to stop it and move it out of the way before letting out another longing sigh. Do you think she's alright? Hearing the worry in the younger girl's voice at the well-being of their resident doctor, Nojiko handed Vivi her the bubble containing her purchases while she kneeled down to get a good look at Mireille's lucidly smiling face. Oh. Is there anyone home in there? She snapped her fingers repeatedly in her face to get her attention, which she finally received when Murat jolted to awareness. What in the world happened to you? You were seriously out of it. Bringing up the topic of what put her in such a state, Murat sat slack in her chair with a blush on her cheeks. I met the coolest guy ever when I was looking at some of the high-end emergency equipment in the store. He's a doctor, and get this, he's a captain of a crew of pirates after One Piece. A doctor that's a captain too. And he made it all the way out here. Vivi said in a bit of amazement. With what they had gleaned thus far, it was quite a feat to go all the way from Reverse Mountain to this point of the Grand Line. That's actually really impressive. She then paid close attention to the fond way Murat had been speaking about this man and got a sly smirk on her face. Wait, are you actually into this guy? Murat spared Vivi a glance before straightening up in her chair, smoothing out her skirt as she pretended to be busy to avoid eye contact. So what if I am? I'm a perfectly adult 19-year-old woman that can make my own decisions. It doesn't stop you from having your little complex with. Ow. Before Murat could finish her sentence meant to poke fun at Vivi, Karu inexplicably awoke and pecked her once in the head. Stupid duck. Byplay between her fellow crewmates aside, Nojiko was still curious over this new development. Yosaku had been trying to get Mireille's favor, and failing miserably, for months, and now she had come across some guy that she had seemed to fallen hard for. The gossip in her wanted to hear a name, even if she had no idea who the person was, which was more than likely. So who exactly is this guy in the first place? He's so cool. Just to clarify, Murat felt the need to reiterate that fact in case it had been lost in translation over the course of the conversation at hand. His name is Trafalgar Law. With Naruto and Miss Valentine Grove 17 lawless area, as the pair sat in a restaurant, watching on with trepidation, Miss Valentine inwardly wondered if she should stop Naruto before he managed to hurt himself, or more importantly the poor table that he was repeatedly slamming his head into. Naruto, you should stop. But he wasn't really hearing her at the moment. Each bang of his head off of the table was accentuated with either one of two words that at this point seemed like they would follow him all over the rest of the world. No. Ramen. No. Ramen. No. Ramen. No. Ramen. Got it, no ramen. Why is there never any ramen? He yelled, alarming all of the patrons in the restaurant more than they already had been by his mental breakdown. It can't possibly be that hard to make. You can't even make it yourself, and your directions were completely half-ed. Miss Valentine commented while looking at her own menu now that Naruto had ceased abusing their poor table with his forehead. How can you expect anyone else to be able to? Don't blame me for that, Naruto said, placing his head down on the table with a defeated look on his face. I became dependent on the greatest source of ramen the mortal plane has ever known. Anything else that I tried to make was rubbish. It didn't help that he could routinely burn water, which was why he wasn't that picky with his food. He had been feeding himself and eating in restaurants all over the elemental nations for over 50 years after leaving Konoha for good. Sometimes he wished he knew the Edo Tensei, impure world resurrection. He was probably deprived enough of good ramen to deal with the moral faults of bringing someone back from the dead at the cost of another's body if only he could have a Yame or Tiyuchi to cook for him again. At times he figured that he couldn't even remember the sweet taste of Ichiraku ramen. Even other places that served it in the elemental nations paled in comparison to the point where he stopped eating it except for once every blue moon in an attempt to rekindle the spark. But at least it had always been an option. Now he didn't even have that. You never know quite what you have until it's gone. It was not an obsession. It was merely a paean. Was that food really that important to him that it affected his overall mood? This was what Miss Valentine was thinking about as she proceeded to pat Naruto's head to try and cheer him up. Come on, it's okay. Why don't you try a steak? Don't want a steak. Want ramen? A grown man older than 3 grown men put together pouting over food in a restaurant. There was something deeply wrong with that. Well, you can't have ramen, so act your age. If I acted my age then I'd be dead. Hearing Naruto be so childish began to work on Miss Valentine's nerves, and instead of patting his head like she had been doing, she grabbed a hold of his spiky golden locks and pulled his head off of the table. Naruto, order some food, she said in a deceptively sweet voice, her face still smiling all the while. This smile had a rather foreboding undertone behind it though. Okay Valentine-chan, Naruto said, not willing to risk earning the usually good-natured woman's ire in a public place. She didn't care about his reputation, she'd emasculate him if she felt the need to, since she knew he'd never hurt her. She had clearly picked that up from Nojiko. They have this pizza crap here but no ramen, this world's going to in a handbasket. Who's spouting crap about pizza? If I have to hear one more word about that stupid non-existent ramen, I'm gonna kick some. That got Naruto's full attention, and not in the good way, as he spun around in his chair, looking for the person trying to slight his perfect food. Upon seeing who it was, his argument died in his throat. Wait, Jewelry Bonnie. You're here. The pink-haired female pirate captain blinked curiously upon seeing who was sitting right behind her the entire time. Too bad she had been too busy eating the mountains of food at her table to notice beforehand. Uzumaki Naruto, she said questioningly. There should be a captain in there somewhere, Naruto said, raising a finger as if to make a definitive point. Ignoring the statement, Bonnie shook her head at the sight of the two blondes sitting right there by her. Well I'll be Ed, I didn't think I'd ever be seeing your stupid-looking face again after the things I've heard. Miss Valentine smirked at the sight of an old familiar face. Wow, I really wasn't expecting to see her again after that run-in with those cyborgs on that island where she took off at the first sign of trouble. Getting a growl of anger out of Bonnie, Miss Valentine let out a laugh. With Soren, Johnny, and Yosaku Shaki's rip-off bar, with Time to Kill, they were regaled by tales from Shaki about the other notable rookie pirate crews that were currently at Sabayati Archipelago, those with bounties that exceeded 100 million belly. And that was where things quickly degenerated in a matter of seconds. Both Soren and Shaki stared at the front door of the bar as it was thrown open, with only 2 dust trails otherwise visible. Shaki looked at the 2 vacant bar stools that used to house Johnny and Yosaku. What did I say to set them off? She asked, wondering exactly what it was that got the 2 swordsmen to sprint out. You told them that the kid pirates were here, Soren replied matter-of-factly, not really caring one way or the other, and who could blame him? Hey, they were big boys and they could take care of themselves. They've got an axe to grind with those guys for what they did to a village a while back. Now they were going to be running around the entire place looking for them just to get some payback. Hopefully they'd get lost and sidetracked, and that would be the end of that until the next time the topic came up. The intelligence level of the 2 men did not give Shaki much confidence in their chances of having an easy time of it if they did indeed find the kid pirates. You really should go after them. I had heard that you were the first mate on your crew, so aren't they your responsibility? She said, trying to urge Soren to get up and go after them. They're older than me. I'm not even 20 yet. Why do I have to be the responsible one? Complained Soren in return. He had finally managed to get some peace and quiet, and now he'd have to lose all of that. Yet he hated the fact that he liked this crew. Fine, I'm going, he said, standing up out of his stool with a grumble. It wouldn't do to have the idiot brothers tear apart an entire grove trying to find and fight some people, and that wasn't even worst-case scenario for what those 2 airheads might do if they actually wound up finding their targets. Throwing a half-hearted wave of departure to the bar's host Shaki, Soren ran out the open door to try and find Johnny and Yosaku. They hadn't even been there for 6 hours yet, and trouble was already beginning to bubble up. Being in the place was going to be more trouble than it was worth. Isn't this I used to be a feared bad guy that made Marines shake in their boots, and now I'm a babysitter for 2 dumb swordsmen. Soren thought to himself as he stomped past the people outside to begin his search. I think I'm going to hate this place. With Johnny and Yosaku gonna kick some. Johnny yelled with his hand on the hilt of his sword as the 2 ran side by side, people clearing out of their way as they did so. Yeah, Yosaku bellowed in agreement before gnashing his teeth heatedly. They didn't know exactly what they were looking for, but they would be Ed if they didn't wind up looking high and low for those smug kid pirate bad guys. They're probably scheming, or even conniving right now. The Shenaving bad guys, was the nearly nonsensical reply from Johnny. They continued to run until Yosaku inexplicably stopped abruptly to stare at a young man sitting on a crate with a nodashi at his side. He was a slim, unassuming-looking man with slight bags under his eyes, a common even smile on his face, black hair, sideburns, a small goatee, a white spotted fur hat on his head, a yellow hoodie with black sleeves that were rolled up to show his tattooed forearms and hands, jeans with brown spots on the knees and ankles, and black shoes. Johnny turned around and ran back to Yosaku to find him staring at the man. "Hey, come on. What are you stopping here for? Let's go kick those bad guys' ass already." Remembering the reason they had run out of Shaki's bar in the first place, Yosaku took off running with Johnny again, leaving the interesting-looking man alone to sit on his crate. Even though the run-in was over, Yosaku couldn't help but think, why did I feel like I wanted to fight that guy like a dog defending its property? It couldn't just be for the sword, could it? Kubikiraboucho is way cooler. Somewhere else with Vivi and Nojiko, Murat suddenly sneezed harshly. Chapter 38. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Where did those idiots go? Soren growled out as he stomped from grove to grove looking for Johnny and Yosaku. The one time he wished they'd have actually screwed some stuff up and left a trail of destruction so he could at least follow them, and they seemed to gain enough coordination to not randomly run into people, knock things over, and make a huge mess to mark the direction they went in. I knew I should have stayed at the bar. That Shaki lady was kind of wow. How old was she again? He was completely scoping some kind of vibe from the woman. From the second he sat at the bar he was commanding Shaki's attention with his greatness. Or maybe that was intentional so he'd buy more drinks from her. His ego was kind of hoping for the former though. Seriously, where the am I? He asked out loud as he looked around and grabbed the first random guy he could, letting him cower at the scowl on his tattooed, scarred face. You. Where the am I and how far am I from Grove 13? If he was still close he was going to quit looking for the dumb brothers and get another drink. Why, you're at Grove 51. The man in his grasp stammered out. This is a whole different district. The shipping area. Shipping area. Grove 51. Soren said in a disappointed voice. I'm nowhere near that bar. The drinks might have been high-priced but the atmosphere was nice. Much better than any shoal he had been in before getting to Sabayati anyway. Wait, what kind of ship stuff does this place specialize in? The ship may have gotten an upgrade at Water 7, but one could never overlook any possible improvements. You don't know. The man still stuck in Soren's headlock said, the fear from the initial meeting of the scary man now gone. You're in a pirate crew, aren't you? Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Soren grinned in a feral manner as he was sure that somewhere on Sabayati Archipelago Naruto had tripped over a root or something along those lines once he had said that. But no, I don't know. So why don't you bless me with some knowledge? The man pointed at the trees and then down. Under the water, deep down on the roots under the ocean, these trees secrete resin that create the bubbles you see all over the place once they come into contact with water. If you coat your ship with the resin, then it'll be able to go underwater and dive down using the ocean currents to steer. And I would do this to my ship. Why? Sinking did not seem like any kind of advantage whatsoever to Soren, who could not swim. I kind of like the ship I'm on and I like living. Drowning doesn't seem like that fun of an option yet. You'll live, and your ship will be fine. It's the only way for pirates like you to get past the red line. You've got to sail down to Fishman Island and head up past it to cross. Don't you know anything about getting to the next part of the Grand Line? No, smart, I don't. Soren said, tightening his headlock somewhat. I personally never gave a crap about going to the New World. But if I can win against the enemies there, then there's no way I'll lose to that bad guy again. So maybe he did have a reason to go to the New World. Not a good one, but not everyone's reason had to be profound and incredible. What bad guy? The confused man strained out through the tightened grip Soren had on his head. Realizing that he still had the poor hapless citizen held in his grasp, Soren let go and he dropped to the ground. Whoa, sorry about that. And don't worry about the whole bad guy thing, inside reference. Thanks by the way, he added as an afterthought as the guy walked away and rubbed his neck. Well, Johnny and Yosaku could wait for a bit while he found his way back to the natural disaster and told Polly what he had just learned, and maybe Naruto too if he could find him. Where were those two morons anyway? Did they actually find the kid pirates and start any trouble? With Johnny and Yosaku, Grove 36 Sabayati Park. We Both Johnny, Yosaku and the other denizens of the log ride they were in yelled as they flew down the large water slide the ride was set on. In the course of their search for the kid pirates they came across this wondrous attraction known as Sabayati Park and had been there for several hours already. Weren't we supposed to be doing something? Johnny yelled at Yosaku over the noise that the others were making on the log ride. Why'd we leave the bar? Upon hearing his partner's question, Yosaku took a moment to think about it before shrugging. I don't know. Who cares? This is way better than the bar though. So shut up and enjoy while we've got the chance, man. And with that the whirlwind search was over. On board the natural disaster Grove 23 of 79 lawless area, so that's how we get past the red line. Naruto said, sounding pleasantly surprised at that bit of news from Soren. That sounds way better than my new idea was going to be. He then noticed the entire crew that had come back to the ship at the end of the day looking at him expectantly. Yeah, you don't want to hear what the idea was going to be. I'm sure we didn't. Nojiko said, cleaning her guns. After seeing how messed up this place could be, she wanted to make sure her equipment was in top condition. Especially with the company she had come to keep and knowing their propensity for falling into something. So how long is this whole thing supposed to take? Do you really care? No. It's just nice to be at land for a bit every once in a while. Chuckling to himself at Nojiko's excuse to just do more shopping while they were still there, Soren decided to answer her question. Well, I took it upon myself to find out more about this whole thing. It'll take a week at most for the ship to be coated. A week? Polly barked incredulously, angrily chomping on his cigar. How would it take a week just to coat the whole ship in resin? What kind of lazy workers does this place have? He angrily started pacing around the common room grumbling about how low the quality of ship workers happened to be away from Water 7. Why don't I just do it myself and save us the time? Because you don't know the first thing about the process. You'd be a rank amateur. Chirped Perona as she gave Polly a few pats on the shoulder. You did and you'd wind up screwing it up and getting everyone killed. A few giggles erupted from her when she saw Polly start to sulk over the fact that he indeed had no skill as a coating mechanic. Meanwhile, Naruto just shrugged, so we just have to hang out here for a week to wait for the ship to get coated. That's fine with me. His eyes then turned around the room as he saw that everyone was of the same mindset. As a matter of fact, Murat seemed a little too happy to still be there. The only one that seemed a little downcast at staying was Vivi. What's the matter with you, Vivi Heim? Something seems off. When attention seemed to be placed on her, a self-conscious looking Vivi just smiled sheepishly in return. Oh, it's nothing. I just have a really bad feeling about this whole thing. I'd rather we just leave, but we can't go any further without staying here to get the resin for the ship first. She really didn't like any possible chance of meeting world nobles when she didn't have to. The last time she went with her father for a World Council Reverie meeting they didn't exactly strike her as people she'd like to spend any amount of time around whatsoever to say the very least. Everything should be fine. Naruto said confidently with a grin. I thought things might get crazy because if this is where everyone stops before moving on we'd probably run into some people we'd rather not see again, but me and Miss Valentine saw Jewelry Bonnie today. At hearing the name of someone they had met on the Grand Line, Johnny and Yosaku started thinking about what we're supposed to be doing earlier that day until they had gotten sidetracked by the theme park, but they just didn't remember what it was. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Soren said before smirking. I found out that I have the third highest bounty of anyone in this place. 251 million. Only behind Uzumaki and that kid prick we fought a few months ago. And he would bet that he was stronger than Kid, he just didn't have a propensity for defeat random people the way he had seen Kid and his crew do. What a cheap way to get famous. Kid pirates, those bad guys are here. Yosaku asked angrily as he and Johnny began to see that the thought of the anarchist pirate crew. Everyone stared at the two swordsmen incredulously while Soren palmed his face hard. Yes, they're here. We found that out hours ago at the bar. What the were you two doing all day to make you forget? I thought you two were supposed to be looking for them to kick their ass. He shook his head when he saw the expressions on their face turn goofy as they started laughing about a log ride or something like that. Whatever it was, I'm sure it was something adult and manly. Miss Valentine said sarcastically before laughing aloud. Log ride. Are you serious? Murat said rather distastefully as she spared Yosaku a glance and shook her head. How uncool can you get? You two are how old? 21. What kind of a swordsman or a pirate goes to an amusement park? One that wants to be amused, obviously. Johnny replied before elbowing Yosaku in the side and whispering at him, "Are you just going to let her talk to us like that? Show some backbone, man. You're a friggin' adult. You can do anything you want to." Yosaku hurriedly shushed Johnny soundlessly before dragging him out of the room and down the hall, whispering back at him, "I'm not trying to piss her off. Don't you see that she's my dream woman? She's cute, she's smart, and she doesn't mind patching me up when I get all cut up. She's perfect. She's never going to want to get with you if you back down like a scared puppy around her," Johnny said, poking him in the side of his headgear repeatedly. "Murat doesn't respect you and she won't if you keep doing stuff like this." A sigh left Yosaku. "You mean I should stop all of the immature stuff we do?" "No. That," Johnny replied, shoving Yosaku in an offended manner. "You don't mean that. I'm talking about you being a when it comes to anything involving her. You fall over yourself to Maraise, and I don't blame her for not being into you. It annoys the out of everyone else too. I can't imagine how she feels about it." Confusion and then a mortified look crossed Yosaku's face. "But if I argue with her and treat her the way I treat everyone else, how will she know I like her? You've been on her for 3 months. Johnny deadpanned. "I think she knows already. But if you want to keep pushing her away and losing your manhood every single time she shoots you down, go on ahead and do it. I can't make you do anything." With that, Johnny headed off to his room and left his oldest friend and partner with his own thoughts on the matter. He took one last glance towards the common room and Murat as he heard her telling everyone else about some cool doctor pirate captain she had met named Trafalgar Law, and walked off towards the dojo in the hold to train a bit. Several days later, Grove 54 shipyard area. "Hey," Naruto said in greeting, appearing in a whirlwind of leaves as he walked towards Polly, who was leaning against the side of a bridge leading to a different grove. "Whoever thought to use these bubbles as wowel rooms needs to be slapped in the face. The privacy s." He then gestured his head towards the grove that their ship was being coated at. "How's it going?" With a cigar burning down in his mouth, Polly took a few puffs and exhaled smoke. It took long enough because they had other coating requests, but the ship should be good to go by the end of the day. He grinned at the fidgeting blonde captain. "I'm going to take a guess and say you're either bored or you've got blue balls since you worrying about the lack of privacy." He chuckled when he saw Naruto's entire form stiffen. "It's the last one, isn't it?" An irritable growl came from Naruto's throat as he looked around with paranoia. "It's this place. It's just saturated with negative emotions. It's centered somewhere in the lawless place, but I just can't find it. It's an aura that's hanging in the air. I can't pinpoint it. And there are so many people here with strong life forces that it's drawing my full focus away when I'm in sage mode." He then looked around after noticing something was amiss. "Where's Perona?" The women took her again, saying something about how it was just cruel for a girl to be stuck with someone like me in a place like this. Polly said as he tapped the ashes off of his cigar. "What the is that supposed to mean, by the way?" Naruto blocked a laugh at Polly's expense and pointed off away from the grove the ship was being treated on, "So the end of the day is a long way away. Do you want to hang out and do something while we wait? Let's go find some trouble to get into." Shaking his head, Polly pushed himself off of the side of the bridge and fed the butt of the rest of his cigar before walking back towards where the ship had been left. "No way, thank you very much. What you consider trouble is way higher on the scale than what I'm cool with tolerating. I'll stay with the ship and make sure those monkeys don't screw anything up that I'll have to fix later." "You're no fun," Naruto shouted after him, only to get a lazily raised middle finger for his trouble from his cruise shipwright. "Great, now there's nobody to hang out with." With a bored sigh, Naruto decided to at least keep searching for the source of all of the negative emotions in Sabayati to occupy himself. Maybe there was something he could do about it in the meantime. It was better than sitting around doing all of nothing for the rest of the day. He began moving from grove to grove at a high speed, faster than any normal person could ever dream of reaching. As he jumped from roof to roof in one of the groves, he eventually came to a screeching halt once he saw pretty much everyone that had been walking around outside on the ground, bowing as a few people walked through the crowd. There was a man in a dark suit and hat that reminded Naruto of one of the government agents that he and Sanji had beaten up on the sea train at Water 7, and there were also a pair of women with strange-looking collars around their necks. The one that really got his attention though was a man riding on another as if he were a horse. He had a fat face, stubble, and a weird hairstyle with his black hair. It looked like a large cow sticking up in the air. He wore a white robe with gold and green trim and had an oxygen tank on his back. Around his head he had on a bubble for some apparent reason, and on his face was a look of utter disdain for the normal people around him. He then remembered what Vivi had told him about world nobles and sneered to no one in particular since he couldn't be seen by the unattentive citizens around him. It was probably best if he just left before he wound up seeing something that would end up setting him off. He told Vivi he'd do his best to avoid them and he wasn't about to go playing with fire just because he was curious and didn't like the way someone looked. Besides, if being down there meant he had to bow to keep from causing trouble, he'd much rather stay up above it all where he currently was. He wasn't about to bow down to anyone, especially someone he didn't respect, and at the moment he had no respect whatsoever for whoever this world noble guy was. With that, he simply vacated the scene unseen, vanishing in a swirl of wind and leaves. With Nojiko, Vivi, Murat, and Perona Grove 73, "Stop talking about that law guy," Perona said in an exasperated manner. She had been grabbed by Nojiko and Vivi to go with them for the day, a welcome break from doing nothing but hanging around that buzzkill shipwright Polly, and then they went to pick up Murat, who had apparently spent the earlier portion of the day with Trafalgar Law again. And she hadn't shut up about him since she had shown up. "We get it, he's awesome. Now shut up already." Murat stuck her out at Perona and opened her mouth again, more than likely to continue gushing over her crush on Law until she found a light as a feather Miss Valentine riding on her back piggyback style with a sweet smile on her face. "Every time I hear you talk about this Law character without being asked first, I'm going to add on 45 kilograms. Murat nodded mutely, not particularly wanting to risk the happy blonde pirate's crushing wrath. While this was happening, Vivi watched on with an amused smile on her face until Nojiko got next to her and bumped her hip into hers. "So, we spent some money, got you some more nice things and whatnot, Your Highness. Do you finally feel better?" "I'll feel better when we leave this place," Vivi said as she looked over at Karu carrying the bubbles that contained her few purchases from the day. "I hate how everyone here can pretend that everything is okay when things like what the slavers do go on around them." Nojiko raised an eyebrow at the younger blue-haired girl and her concerns. "You know, most people that would pick fights with others know who we are. Why would they go after us when our bounties are so high?" "I don't have a bounty," Perona chimed in brightly, with Murat raising her hand as well. "We do though," Nojiko continued, unfettered by the ghost princess and her need to interject in the middle of her point. "Both me and Miss Valentine almost have a combined bounty that reaches 100 million. Vivi gave her a dry look and pointed at herself. "The reward for capturing me and giving me to the Marines or taking me back to Alabasta is 150 million. To someone that really wants the money, it's worth the risk, especially if they can beat you two and take your bounties to boot." "That's not very helpful. Then we'll just beat them up," interpolated a characteristically cheerful Miss Valentine, holding up her umbrella above her and Murray's heads. "I mean, we're all tough enough with good working weapons and fists, aren't we? And with Naruto's built-in excuse about you being brainwashed or hypnotized or whatever it's supposed to be, you can fight anyone you want to now." Instead of cheering Vivi up with the confidence in their own ability to defend themselves, it only caused her to wallow in anguish even further. "You can't solve all of your problems by just beating them up. Sometimes there's just too much to lose by doing that." This was not Nefertari Vivi. Vivi was a usually bright and cheerful girl. Even at Eni's lobby she didn't think that things were desperate for even a moment and went along with the others fearlessly. Ever since they had arrived in Sabayati Archipelago she had been fearful and downcast. Just like right now. As a matter of fact, especially right now with the look of abject horror on her face. Wait, what was the matter with her? "No," Vivi said before rushing to Murray's back and getting Miss Valentine down, much to her displeasure and confusion. "Bow. Bo, right now, I'm telling you, you don't need them to pick you out of a lineup." "What on earth are you talking about?" Nojiko asked before turning her eyes once her attention was attracted by the absurd amount of people dropping down to Bo, Vivi, Murat, and Miss Valentine included, as the last two were forced to by Vivi. Nojiko let out a silent curse and did the same once she saw who was coming their way. Riding atop the same unfortunate man as before and now picking his nose through the sturdy bubble on his head, the fat-looking world noble that Naruto had seen roughly an hour before was carried through the crowd of people, sneering at them as if they were all roaches scurrying around him. I don't see why the commoners are even allowed to come outside of their hovels when they know that the world nobles are in the area. Miss Valentine was not laughing for once as she kneeled along with the others and looked at Vivi's petrified face as she tried to keep it angled down. I'm assuming that this is one of those world nobles you were fretting over so much, she said softly so as not to stick out per Vivi's instructions. All Vivi did in return was nod, not willing to speak and draw the man's attention. You. Everyone tensed up when they heard the man call out to someone amongst them, but no one dared move for one reason or another. A gunswow then rang out, alarming them all, but none more so than Vivi as the bullet was deposited right in front of her to where she was looking down. She turned her eyes up to find the world noble looking directly at her like he had seen a ghost, his gold-plated, jewel-encrusted pistol falling from his hand in shock. It's you. Nefertari Vivi. Vivi didn't know this person personally at all. She'd know if she had ever run across a world noble in an individual way in her life, and she hadn't. Not even when she had ventured to Marijoy with her father years ago. How do I know you? She then hurriedly corrected herself in case she would offend him. I mean, of course I know of you. But how do you know of me? Of course you know of the great Saint Charles. How could you not? The world noble said in an obnoxiously haughty manner. I can see how you would think that one in a higher state of being such as me wouldn't remember a lowly princess of a kingdom such as yourself, but you've had me stricken since the day I saw you those 2 years ago. Stricken. That didn't sound good from Vivi's point of view whatsoever. Charlos jumped down from the person he had been riding prior to seeing Vivi and kicked his legs out from under him to knock him to the ground for easier remounting. I wanted to take you in addition to my 12 other wives, but as you were with your father at Reverie I simply could not take you to be mine. But God has been good and has brought you back to me with nothing in my way. Nefertari Vivi, you're coming with me to become my wife. I demand it. Oh no. Nojiko thought, subtly moving one of her hands to a pistol at her waist to show that overbearing bad guy what she thought of that until Vivi's leg kicked her hand back down out of sight. What the are you doing? There's no way this guy that doesn't do anything important can have enough power to make Vivi be his wife. She shared looks of shock and panic with the other 3 women there bearing witness to what was happening. But Vivi was far away from home, and the way she was she had next to no power other than her name. Apparently this man had the world government willing to stick up for him, and Vivi was terrified of him before even knowing that there was a world noble around. Without a word, Vivi stood up and walked the rest of the way over to St. Charles. I see. She spared a glance back at Miss Valentine, Nojiko, Murat, and Perona and just shook her head with a stone-cold look on her face. Oh, I finally have my rare, exotic Alabastan beauty. Charlos exclaimed with a sense of glee. Whether he was ignoring the despair radiating off of Vivi or simply did not care one way or another he didn't show as he climbed back onto the poor man that had been carrying him. PSHT, I need a stronger slave. How else would I transport my lovely and most treasured bride-to-be? To the human auction house. Everyone kept bowing until the noble and his entourage got out of their sight, and then the citizenry got up and continued on with their lives as if they had not been more or less held hostage just moments prior. Only Nojiko, Miss Valentine, and Murat stayed in the positions that they had been in beforehand as Perona had gotten up and had wondered why they were still in the same kneeling stance. Murray's eyes were quivering in pure disbelief at what had just occurred. Did that really just happen? That didn't just happen right in front of us, did it? Why didn't we do anything? Miss Valentine said, shaking her own head as she stood up and looked in the direction that Vivi had gone off in with St. Charlos. I thought you were about to blow that guy away, Nojiko. What happened to that? She stopped me. The voice of Nojiko seemed almost haunted at what had just occurred. Vivi had been taken without a fight. Not from her and not from them either. For the love of God, are these people that scary that she'd rather go with them than fight back? You're right, they are. The girls turned towards a pirate with a familiar face as far as Nojiko and Miss Valentine were concerned, especially with the X scar on his chin, X Drake. Miss Valentine said in recognition of the sharply dressed former Marine. Drake nodded at being identified. It has been quite some time since we've met Foxhound pirates. Is that barbarian Soren still alive, or has Uzumaki gotten sick of his baggage yet? Nojiko stepped towards him with a stern look on her face. Vivi seemed totally terrified of these people, but I saw that guy shoot when he was getting her attention. He couldn't hit a sea king in the head at 10 feet with that gaudy pistol of his. she said, stomping on said gaudy pistol that Charlos hadn't even seen fit to pick up again. I could have put him and his stupid black-suited escorts down in a matter of seconds. 6 swows are enough to kill anything that moves. And you would have called down the full wrath of the Marines' most potent fighting force. Unless you think you could survive a run-in with an admiral. Drake said with a serious look on his face, because the moment that a world noble falls into some sort of jeopardy, an admiral will be called forth and all that comes with it to deal with the issue. Nojiko wanted to say that Naruto could fight an admiral. But his condition after the last battle with one he had, and the technicality that had netted him the victory by default that he would never be able to duplicate twice kept her from speaking up on the matter. Hearing nothing from her or any of the women, Drake continued, you shouldn't be angrily questioning why this has just happened because it's quite simple as to why it did. World nobles are simple once you get past the smoke and mirrors. Saint Charlos wanted something and he got it. Instead you should be thanking your friend Nefertari Vivi for giving up her freedom to ensure that a ruckus wasn't caused. If she had refused or hesitated he would have tried to harm her, and if you had attacked him then you and potentially every pirate in Sabayati would be in complete and utter jeopardy. She's clearly stronger-willed than the rest of you. Murat looked down in a bit of shame even though there was not much she could do anyway due to her lack of combat ability. On the other hand both Miss Valentine and Nojiko seethed at the barbed remark as one wished to give him a swow and the other wished to try and crack his skull with her umbrella. It was Drake's parting words that really gave them pause though. It's too bad that strong will of hers will be broken soon once she's taken from this place. With Soren, Johnny, and Yosaku Grove 6 Glee Club. In a dark and dingy building with an open floor surrounded by spectators drinking and cheering raucously, Soren stood, sans shirt or shoes with his arms crossed. He smirked as he was staring down 5 different men in similar states of dress. Am I really going to have to come after you all or have you been paying attention to the last 7 fights to know that you don't want me to do that? There was little more that needed to be said as at that moment all 5 of them jumped at Soren and began pounding away on any part of his body that they could reach as he stood there, still as a statue with a displeased look on his face. I might as well be getting rocks thrown at me as weak as these punches are, Tekai Iron M, or not. Soren quipped, almost yawning for all of the effect the attackers were having on him. Eventually he got sick of taking punches and vanished in a rush of Soru before knocking 2 of the men out from behind with a pair of clotheslines that knocked them upside down onto their heads. He kicked another man in the stomach sending him flying into another and then delivered an uppercut to the last one that knocked him up through the ceiling. Ha! And that's that. Now pay me fools. Woo! Johnny and Yosaku cheered, waving mugs around and spilling beer everywhere. Pay us fools. They chimed in stereo as Soren came walking out of the fight pit fing a large stack of bills. He grinned and handed a few of the proceeds of his winnings to both swordsmen to share the wealth. Yeah Soren. Yeah, me. Soren said in a very pleased manner as he put his shirt and boots back on. I thought I could train my Rokushiki in here but there isn't anyone that can throw a half-decent punch to put me to the test. Johnny gestured to the door as Yosaku finished his mug of beer in one swig. Well let's go then. This place waters their beer down anyway. The bartender's a total cheat. Cheat. The entire club said as one before looking around and glaring at each suspiciously. Yosaku finished drinking and dropped his mug before noticing the standoff and grinning. He motioned Soren and Johnny out of the club before picking up a chair and throwing it through the air. All eyes were on the chair until it hit the ground, not injuring a soul, and then a MIV brawl involving most of the club's patrons started. Soren, Yosaku, and Johnny stared at the wild, yet tame by their standards of what incorporated a real fight, melee from the entrance of the bar before shrugging to themselves and leaving. Johnny elbowed Yosaku as they walked onward to the next grove to find something else to get into. How did you know that would work and start a fight? A scoff came from Yosaku as he grinned mischievously. It's a port full of pirates and whatnot. I could have thrown a peanut into there and it probably still would have started that fight. So where to now? If I know. Soren said, tying his bandana back onto his bald head to finish getting redressed, but this is getting pretty tame. I want to find the worst, most lowdown. I can't believe places like this exist in the modern world spot to go to. Why? I don't know. Life experience. Soren said awkwardly, besides, I've got all of this money and nothing to spend it on except booze, and I got enough of that for free with every fight I won in that club. You've got a ton of money to spend. I know just the place, a rough-looking guy like you would like to drop that cash. A Weasley-looking guy said, having eavesdropped on the conversation. You look like the kind of. He let out a yelp of alarm as he found Johnny's sword suddenly placed against his neck. Don't kill me, please. Who do you think, Soren? Johnny said, offended at the way that the man implied that he would feel right at home in some lowdown place. He would have continued had Soren not walked closer and put his hand on the flat of the sword to lower it. Soren. Let him talk, Johnny. The second in command of the natural disaster said, putting on his best sadist face for the sake of selling his cover. I want to hear what he has to say. Tell me a place I might like to go. The man thanked his lucky stars that this psychopath with the facial tattoo and murderous aura spared his life for the time being. You want to take that what is it, $1 million? But yeah, anyway, you're going to want to take that over to the human auction house if you know what I'm saying. I heard there was a good crop of slaves this time. My crew went out and did some good work. Some good-looking girls. You could buy yourself a nice one. As the man continued to speak, both Yosaku and Johnny felt like cutting him clean in half and their faces showed it, but Soren's visage remained strangely stoic until the man finished speaking. Maybe I'll stop by. Thanks for the tip, he said before motioning for the man to buzz off and leave, which he then proceeded to do without a second thought. Soren let him get quite a distance away until aiming a loogie high into the air and letting it fly in a high arcing pattern until it fell down and hit the man right on the top of the head, eliciting screams of anguish as he fell to the ground and started rolling around until he came to a stop with people crowding around him to see what had happened. The boots of the acid-manipulating young man thudded off of the ground as Johnny and Yosaku followed him, not saying a word with hard looks on their faces. Slaver S. He spat on the ground spitefully before he turned his head to look back at the two swordsmen. Do you think karma would have our backs for once if we went and started some trouble? With Naruto Grove one human auction house, it was crushing him. The feeling around this place was smothering him, choking him alive. He hadn't felt such intense and concentrated despair in one place in his entire life. Standing slightly outside of sight of the large auction hall on the bridge leading to the grove in general, Naruto fell to his hands and knees with his sage mode eyes active. His blue eyes soon returned with him sweating and breathing heavily on the ground now that he had found his relief, so this is where it came from. All of that anger, sadness, hate, everything. From the center of the archipelago. It didn't feel like this until just recently. He had been around there before but everything had been spread out and hard for him to pinpoint. There was no mistaking where it was all coming from now. Uzumaki. Naruto Aniki. Naruto was hurriedly picked up by his arms and steadied by Johnny and Yosaku while Soren tried to look him in the face. Are you alright? You look like you have to puke or something. I might. Naruto said before letting out a sick-sounding burp and holding his stomach. This place made me sick when I was in sage mode. I could feel everyone inside. There were so many negative emotions and despicable people. I haven't felt anything like this even on a battlefield. It's a slave auction house, Naruto Aniki. Yosaku informed Naruto, patting his back to help even him out. We found out about this place like an hour ago and came right here. Soren got it out of some guy that we think was a slaver. Right, Soren, he said, getting no affirmation from the man. Soren. The thing that kept Soren's attention from responding to Yosaku was that he could see several smiley face symbols with cancel marks through them. Don Quixote Doflamingo's symbol that had been seen with the Shichibukai's former loose affiliates the Bellamy Pirates when they were on Jaya. Johnny's eyes spotted something emerging from the auction house and he narrowed his orbs at it from behind his sungles. Look. He directed everyone's attention to the sight of a rich-looking man and woman laughing smugly with a burly attendant dragging a man in chains away from the building across the bridge that they were on. The tall and strong-looking enslaved man had shoulder-length feathery blonde hair, blonde stubble on his chin, and bandages wrapped around his forehead as well as an open dirty black jacket and a white ruffled shirt underneath to go with torn black dress pants and no shoes. Naruto growled and bared his sharpened canines angrily at watching the man get dragged harshly by the strange collar around his neck. Between the negative emotions that had been drenching the environment all week and the sight of a slave being dragged away right in front of him, Naruto had seen enough. As the couple walked away, happily chatting about what they were going to do or buy next, they found their progress halted by a blonde man standing between them with his arms around their shoulders in a friendly manner, though the smile on his face had a belying treacherous nature to it. Did you guys just purchase that guy back there? Naruto said, gesturing his head back to the obvious slave. The man smiled proudly and adjusted his suit before answering, yes we did. I'm afraid if you were looking for such a fine specimen yourself this man isn't for sale. Byron just had too many advantages to me to pee up. He'll be worth the 600,000 I paid for him. If you're looking for your own to buy I suggest you head inside before the auctions all end. The woman suggested, I don't think there are any other men for sale that are as good as this one, but I heard that there is a mermaid in there for sale. Expensive but exotic. Well worth the price. The man agreed with a nod, but I just need this man here to work on my ship. He's going to be very use. Why don't you just let him go? Both the man and the woman looked at Naruto with stunned expressions, but he still had that pleasant smile with his eyes closed. The man stammered before finally getting his words back, let him go. Are you out of your mind? I paid good money for this slave. No, I'm pretty sane mostly. Naruto said, tightening his hold on the two so that they couldn't move, though that probably had to do with the defeat intent that he began to radiate lowly. Apparently it's the rest of this world that's crazy. The large attendant that had been dragging Byron jumped at Naruto to attack him. He never got close before he found himself cut down in one move by Johnny, with the only move he made visible to normal people being the end of the Kusanagi no Tsurugi resheathing with AC. Yosaku then sprinted forward and batted the man away with the width of Kubikiraboucho, sending him flying. Naruto's defeat intent grew and grew until both the man and the woman simply collapsed from the pressure he was exerting, both foaming at the mouth. Upon seeing that he sighed before glaring at the distant human auction house. I want to thank you for your effort. Byron said with his eyes to the ground, staring angrily at the people that figured that buying and selling him was okay, but I'm afraid there's nothing you can do further for me. He pointed to the collar on his neck. Once it is learned that I've escaped they'll just trigger the bomb collar on my neck and any attempt to break the chain will result in it exploding as well. Only the handlers in the auction house have the key to free me. A key? Who needs a key? I am a key. Soren said, punching into the palm of his other hand. I'll melt that piece of crap off of you, explosive and all. He walked up to the nervous Byron and grabbed his collar tightly right around where the explosive was rooted as a sizzling noise and steam rose from the device. Much to the surprise of the man, Soren then yanked the collar off and threw it away. There. Now you can run as far away as you want to now. Tears sprang to Byron's eyes before he suddenly dropped to the ground in front of the four men and bowed to them all. I don't know how to possibly thank you. A frown crossed Naruto's face as he pulled the taller, more muscular man up from off of the ground. Just don't get caught again if you really want to thank us. He then moved past Byron to cross the rest of the bridge to get to Grove 1 in the human auction house. Now I think we should go bust this whole thing up. Are you guys with me? We're definitely going to get into some serious trouble for this. Soren chuckled and cracked his knuckles as steam from his own acid rose from his body in anticipation. Doflamingo owns that place. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm all in Uzumaki. You can count on that. It's going down. What, do you think we're just going to run back to the ship where Polly is and hide until this is all over? Yosaku said, swinging Kubikiraboucho around wildly before stabbing it into the bridge. No way. Johnny nodded and placed his hand under his chin in a serious pose. For better or worse we're your loyal Dobermans Naruto and Ikki. And this is as good a reason to cause trouble as anything else we've ever done. Both he and Yosaku threw an arm over each other's shoulder and pointed their swords at the auction house. Let's do this thing. Byron clenched his fists and ran in front of the crew as they walked towards the grove, cutting them off from advancing any further. I want to go with you. Please let me go. I can fight. I want to fight. No one said anything at first until Naruto spoke. Well, that's the thing about not being a slave. He said with a grin springing to his face as he gave Byron a thumbs up. You can do anything you want to as long as you're free. So follow along if you want to. You don't have to ask us anything. If you want to fight then that's your choice. We'll try and save you some. His grin then turned feral as he walked past Byron and continued on his way. Seeing Naruto walk and stretch out his shoulders to get ready for a fight, a grin just couldn't happen but spring to Byron's face. The first grin he had managed since he had first been captured. Save me some. You should hope that I save you some. Inside the human auction house, from a spot in the balcony of the auction house next to Perona, Murat, and Miss Valentine, Nojiko was looking through her hands like a sniper scope, gnashing her teeth angrily. One swow. He'd never feel a thing. Nobody would know it was me at all, and then Vivi could just run away from that bad guy. She could see St. Charles sitting next to a woman and an older man wearing the same outfit he was wearing. Then why aren't you taking the SWAT girl? Nojiko turned her head and felt her need to shoot something increase when she saw Used Kid and his crew sitting nearby with the same smug air about them they had through her scope on the island in the village they destroyed. Kid's feet were even up on the railing of the balcony. "Oh, it's you," Nojiko said in a less than excited voice. "What are you doing here? Looking to buy someone to clean your mess of a ship for you." Kid sneered at her before letting out a scoff and turning his attention back on the auctions below. "The only reason I even know about you is because you're on Uzumaki's crew. I'd kill you just to tell him. Oh, but this ain't the time or the place." He didn't even bother looking at her but pointed instead. "You're not going to fire a single SWAT in here as long as those world nobles are down there, and you know it. If you do, you'll be screwing over every pirate in the building and every pirate in Sabayati." "Well, just what are we supposed to do then? Let them take her away to Marijoy," Miss Valentine said, not laughing or smiling for once because the situation most definitely didn't warrant it. "I don't care who they are. People just can't do this to others and get nothing done to them in return. Yeah, the world is messed up, isn't it?" Kid's face twisted into a grimace as he looked down at the auction floor to see a man on display bite his own off to keep from being sold. "Sure, there are guys like me walking around, but at least I don't try to justify what I do. I'm a bad guy and a scoundrel and I do what I want, and I know I'm going to, but when you compare people like us to them, we're saints. At least we're kind of charming about our villainy and know who we are. They justify their actions based off of what their ancestors did centuries ago." At that point for the next auction, a curtain was pulled back to reveal in a closed-up bowl filled with water a chained-up mermaid with neck-length green hair and purple eyes wearing a yellow and pink t-shirt. A mermaid. An astonished Murat rubbed her eyes almost in disbelief. "I've never seen a fishman or a mermaid before. Are they really about to sell her to someone? 500 million belly. I'll bid 500 million. The jaws of all four women in the balcony dropped at hearing such an urtive declaration of spending so much money. 500 million. Just like that. Perona said in disbelief at the bid. "I've never seen that much money in my entire life. You guys don't even have that much. All you've got is like 300 million at most." No one even bothered asking her how she knew that, as she was still technically their prisoner. As chattering throughout the building went up on how no one could match that price, Murat looked down at who made the bid and frowned. "Oh man, just look at who bought the poor mermaid." They all looked down and Kid let out a sardonic laugh when everyone saw who it was. A lesson in what the justice of this world really boils down to. And what is so just about all of this. In the wake of his son's bid, the older male world noble shook his head. "There you go again, wasting money. Isn't your fish tank already packed full of piranhas to begin with?" Charlos simply had a satisfied smile on his face at being moments away from getting what he was after. "Money isn't an object when it comes to making my new wife feel welcome," he said as he looked at a completely reserved and emotionless Vivi sitting between them. "The chase that will bring should be very entertaining. She should enjoy the sight. Isn't that right?" Vivi only stiffly nodded, never tearing her eyes away from what was directly in front of her, even though the mermaid's fate would be far worse than her own. "You are going to brand this girl, are you not, brother?" the female world noble on the other side of Charlos said, looking at Vivi with some disdain, though she didn't return the look and make eye contact. "She is yours now." "Absolutely not," Charlos exclaimed in return. "She is not less than human. If anything, she's above them. Far above them. And that is why having her is such a desirable thing. She is my wife, not a slave." Same difference, Vivi thought cynically. She had survived Crocodile, a civil war breaking out in her own country, dealing with the Marines on their own doorstep, escaping captivity and blackmail, and now she wound up being done in by an admirer more dangerous and politically powerful than she had ever dealt with before and ever dreamt of having to handle. Elsewhere in the auction house, Sanji, Chopper, Nami, and even former enemy Hatchin were almost to the point of panic as they watched their fried, the mermaid for sale, be auctioned away without the ability to do anything. "Isn't there anything we can do?" Chopper in his large human form asked the others. "There's got to be something, right? Come on, Sanji. We can't just let Kimi get dragged off by that guy." All Sanji could do was shake his head. He didn't even feel like taking a puff of the cigarette in his mouth. "This is really bad. We never accounted for this possibility. We were relying on trying to solve this with money and get out of here. But things just got a whole lot worse. He looked over at the smug man that had put out a bid that no one would be able to match and went wide-eyed at who he saw, concealed as she was by the other people around her. I'd know that exotic beauty anywhere, even from behind. That can't be Vivi, can it? What was Vivi doing there? Why was she with those people by herself? And why was the ground shaking? Meanwhile, backstage in the human auction house, a human-shaped hole in the wall stood right in front of dozens of bodies that were beaten to a pulp, all cut up, and in some cases melted in some rather vital areas, like I said. Soren said, cracking his neck to the side as Johnny cut down the very last man that tried to stop them from infiltrating. Who needs a key? I am a key. Am I right or am I right? He said, looking over at Byron with a feral grin. You fight good. How the did anyone ever catch you? Always watch your drinks in a strange place. Byron said, crossing his arms and not willing to say any more than that. The other three men nodded in full understanding of what he was implying. I can't believe we got in at all without any ruckus. Yosaku said in a rather ecstatic sounding voice. Naruto Anaki's doing a really good job outside keeping their attention. You idiots messed my whole plan all up. Upon hearing the grizzled voice coming from the direction of the cages, all four men looked inside to see an old man with long gray hair, a gray beard, a pair of glees on his face, and a vertical scar going down his right eye. He wore a gray hooded sweatshirt, a plain green t-shirt underneath, and a brown pair of shorts with sandals. Well, there's a new plan now, old man, because we're getting you out. Johnny exclaimed, expecting the old man to show some gratitude as Yosaku hacked right through the bars of the cage. This is the part where you cheer and thank us, and all of that other hero crap. The old man didn't respond. He merely grabbed the chain at the end of his collar and with one sharp tug broke the links, triggering the explosion around his neck, much to the horror of the Foxhound pirates and their tagalong. But then, much to their surprise, the smoke cleared to find that there was nothing wrong with the man whatsoever. I'd have to use Tekai to negate that kind of thing. Soren thought to himself, finding this old man to be more dangerous than they had first let on. Even then I'd still get burned from the blast and my ears would be ringing to boot. Just who is this old guy? The old man tossed aside the remains of the collar with a smirk on his face as he stood up. Outside the human auction house, Naruto stood completely surrounded by the entire force of Marines that had been surrounding the building as a security precaution for the proceedings inside. Yeah, it's me, Uzumaki Naruto. 395 million belly bounty. Just wandering around here to walk inside and kill every noble inside in a rain of blood and blah, 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 as I am wont to do from my reputation as a ruthless bad guy and kicker of small puppies and whatnot. Spoke Naruto long-windedly in a bored-sounding voice as he was held at gun and saber point by every Marine wanting to keep him from going a step further. We have you surrounded, you can't escape. Surrender. Can I do my introduction first? Asked Naruto with a tilt of his head, only to have every Marine their firearms in preparation to shoot at him. Is that a no? No. Too bad. After uttering those words, the Naruto that was surrounded disappeared in a puff of smoke before an even large puff of smoke appeared in the air above them. Kuchiyos. Yutai Kuzushi no Jutsu, summoning. Food cart destroyer jutsu. And a large summon toad the size of the auction house dropped right on top of them, with Naruto standing on top of its head as the Marines that managed to escape the attack scuttled about. Because when it comes to asking for permission, for me it's more like asking for forgiveness, because the immortal Toad Sage needs agreement from no one to do what he wishes. Let the chaos commence, because Uzumaki Naruto is in the house. Outside the house. Whatever, you get the point. This really is the pirate Uzumaki Naruto after all. Keep him and the creature away from the building. I am not a pirate. I'm a ninja. Shouted Naruto as the large toad he had summoned began hopping around the area with Naruto on its back, causing panic and tremors around the entire area. Naruto just sat down on the toad's back, marveling at his version of a distraction. He would just have his large amphibian friend level the whole place once the slaves inside were freed and it cleared out. Problem solved. And then flying through the air, Naruto saw what he could only define as a giant flying fish crash into the human auction house and land inside. Normally one would find something quite wrong with this, since the random attacking of a regional fixture building was only reserved for people like him that were just enough of anarchists to deal with things they didn't like. But being someone that had long since been used to weird things, and with Naruto being the eternal optimist, he wanted to go inside and see just what was going on in there with the internal disruption. Because really, what was the worst that could happen because of something like that? Omake. Long time no see, Grove 54 shipyard area, there's a call for you. The shout from the ship that was currently being coated in the resin needed for the Foxhound pirates to continue on their trip got Polly's attention from his making sure that the coating mechanics took care with the natural disaster. What do you mean there's a call for me? Who is it? We didn't pick it up to see. It just started ringing in your main room inside. Do you want us to answer it? With a grumble, Polly got up from where he was sitting and used his ropes to quickly climb aboard without touching the sides of the freshly coated ship, stomping his way across the GR-covered deck to head inside to the common room. He picked up the receiver of the Den Den Mushi and held it to his mouth to speak. Yeah. Who's calling? Is that Polly? It's been a while, hasn't it? Polly frowned at the familiar voice he heard over the line and let a plume of smoke escape through his nose before he chose to speak again. I thought I fired you guys. That doesn't really matter anymore, does it? We let bygones be bygones, and so did your captain. I suppose that's the best I'm going to get in regards to an apology after betraying Iceberg and all of your fellow shipwrights after 5 years of camaraderie. Remarked Polly, lazily sitting down on a couch in the room to continue talking. So what are you calling for? Or can I just hang up on you and feel good about myself? Where is Uzumaki? We want to talk to him about something. He made us an offer earlier that we took him up on and we wish to have his help. He's not around right now. Polly said, throwing his feet up on the coffee table in the room to relax. We're in Sabayati Archipelago, so if you want me to find him it'll take an hour at least. He could have just gone into Naruto's room if it wasn't locked and used the kunai he kept on his headboard to summon him, but he really didn't like who he was speaking to and would rather not help them. Fine. When he appears, tell him that we're actually near that location and we need to meet. Or you can just go to Grove 54 and wait near our ship for him to come back. I'm going to punch a lot of you right in your faces when I see you all again, just so you know. Feel free to try. AC, and the conversation ended by way of the other line hanging up, leaving Polly to sigh and set the receiver aside. I hate those guys, thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.